Even though the Thunderbird had already been incinerated, the flames remained unquenched, engulfing half of the battle arena in their terrible grip. As Thorian pondered ways to extinguish the fire, to his surprise, the flames suddenly vanished with a whoosh. Marvelous display of magic, Tsahar clapped, his voice echoing through the scorched air as he approached Thorian. Not only do you command the primary elements, but you also possess control over the secondary ones. I wouldn't say I have control, Thorian replied, shaking his head. I have merely acquired skills in manipulating various elements. Nonetheless, it is truly impressive, Tsahar nodded, his eyes gleaming with admiration. Even with the aid of the gods, very few possess the ability to accomplish what you just did. Observing the skeletal mage's unwavering determination to compliment him, Thorian offered a slight smile and nodded in response. Well then, let us ascend the stairs, Tsahar gestured towards the staircase they had descended. I am certain you wish to collect your rewards now. As they ascended the staircase, Tsahar began to speak unprompted. Magic is truly an enigma. To understand it is to understand the cosmos, in all its beautiful expanse and its intricately woven details. I devoted my entire life to this endeavor, and even after my mortal form decayed, my quest did not cease. After letting out an abstained sigh, Tsahar turned to Thorian with an apologetic countenance. I apologize for diverging onto a tangent. I merely felt the need to impress upon you the value of probing deeper into the essence of magic. Only by comprehending, shaping it to your authentic intent, will you break free from the celestial chains imposed by the gods. Upon hearing Tsahar's profound proclamation, Thorian paused to contemplate. Do you suggest I should master the manipulation of mana?
Mana manipulation?
Tsahar pondered, the hollows of his skeletal face flickering faintly. Consider it as a larger confinement. It surely offers additional room for maneuver but remains a cage nonetheless. Despite the illusion of expanded freedom, it's just another tier of the gods' constraints, albeit less restrictive. True understanding in magic lies beyond these enforced limits. Tsahar's revelation caused Thorian's eyebrows to rise in astonishment. In his decade-long experience, he had never heard such an assertion. Are you implying that I should disregard the existing system? Thorian asked, the implications of Tsahar's insight sinking in. No, you're currently too weak to go through such a tribulation, the mage countered, shaking his head before he resumed his ascent. But perhaps someday you'll have the chance to glimpse beyond the celestial veil. Should that opportunity come, do not waste it. Tsahar's words stirred a tumult of thoughts within Thorian. Utilizing magic without the confines of a system? Can such a thing even be possible? Even when I had gained mastery over fire, not requiring any specific technique to incinerate armies by the thousands, I was engaging in mana manipulation. That still conforms to the system. No matter how intensely he probed his intellect, Thorian found it difficult to comprehend Tsahar's implication. More accurately, even though he could grasp the isolated meaning of the words, he could not actualize them in context. He was unable to envision how magic beyond the system could potentially manifest or how it would substantially differ from the conventional use of mana manipulation. Yet Tsahar afforded him little time to mull over the philosophical discourse. The duo swiftly traversed the ascending staircase, returning to the room adorned with shelves. The skeletal mage navigated towards his desk and began rummaging through various artifacts. Eventually, he withdrew a cerulean crystal, barely nestling within his skeletal grip. Upon closer inspection, Thorian discerned other hues jostling and harmonizing within the confines of the light blue gemstone. Since we were discussing mana manipulation, I presumed you would find greater value in this reward over others, Tsahar remarked, smoothly approaching Thorian. Naturally, there are still 2 additional options at your disposal for your reward. However, they are unlikely to parallel the relevance of this one. Mana Manipulation I Skill Crystal. Use, grants the user the act of skilled mana manipulation I, enabling the sensing and basic use of mana for rudimentary spells and enchantments. Description, this crystal, glowing with an ethereal light, is a beginner's gateway to the realm of magic. Upon touch, it dissolves and transfers the fundamental knowledge of a mana manipulation I into the user's mind. Essential for any magic-leaning adventurer, it breaks class boundaries and forms the bedrock of magical understanding. Inspecting the petite crystal within his palm, Thorian couldn't resist the surge of joy reflecting in his broad grin. A skill crystal this soon? And one specialized in mana manipulation at that? Lady Luck has truly favored me today. As covetousness coiled around Thorian's heart, his gaze drifted back to Tsahar. Could you provide me with another mana manipulation crystal? I could accept it instead of the other two rewards. That seems like a fair trade, the skeletal mage nodded, puzzled. But why would you ask for such an exchange? An additional crystal wouldn't be useful to you. Sporting a knowing smile, Thorian responded, I intend it as a gift for a friend. Herald, consider it a tribute to a long and fertile companionship. If such is your desire, then I have no objections. Tsahar pivoted and began his search for another homologous azure gemstone. While the skeletal mage busied himself at his desk, Thorian was suddenly assailed by a cascade of notifications. Level up! Level up! Congratulations, adventurers, an ethereal voice echoed throughout the room, gathering both Magi's attention. You have vanquished the guardian of the first layer, the Lightning Prince. You've shown strength, courage, and exceptional teamwork. The treasure of this layer is yours to claim. Even as the spectral voice receded into silence, Tsahar's gaze remained tethered to the ceiling. The flickering embers within his hollow sockets bore testament to his ardent longing. It appears your comrades have accomplished their task, the skeletal mage broke his silence after a few lingering moments. Indeed, they have, answered Thorian, his voice rippling with pride. I was worried earlier, yet it seems that was unnecessary. They've proven their capability to act independently and triumph even against unfamiliar foes. While Thorian was engrossed in his contemplations, Tsahar approached him, brandishing another azure crystal in his skeletal hand. Here is your second reward. Tsahar extended the skill crystal to Thorian before resting his skeletal hand on his shoulder. Since your allies have already cleared this dungeon, I shall send you directly to them. I sincerely hope we cross paths again, and ideally while retaining your memory when that time arrives. Why, before Thorian could articulate his protest, a luminous flash erupted from Tsahar's hand, enveloping the flame kobold entirely. When Thorian finally dared to open his eyes again, he found himself in an entirely unfamiliar environment. He stood amidst a vast garden that sprawled as far as the horizon reached. The heavens overarched him, remarkably clear, save for the sporadic bolt of lightning that carved through the skies. Although a closer inspection revealed the presence of a gray shroud enveloping him from all sides. It didn't require much consideration for him to comprehend that he was standing within the eye of a storm. The eye of the storm, the dwelling of the guardian of this dungeon, Thorian reflected upon his new surroundings. Despite the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in his mind, he found himself gravitating back to the image of Tsahar, the skeletal mage. An archmagus? What a farce. To think I likened my former self to such a formidable entity. The true nature of that being must be that of an awakened, or perhaps even a transcendent. Recalling the astounding power and intricate magical prowess the skeletal mage exhibited during their encounter, Thorian shivered involuntarily. He found himself unconsciously gnawing on his fingers as he entered a deep meditative contemplation. Soon, the raucous cacophony from the outside world yanked Thorian back from his reverie. From his vantage point, he observed his cluster of 9 kobolds and 10 direwolves congregating around a spot where the golden light burst forth. A golden hue again? Thorian clicked his tongue in slight disappointment. I was hoping for a prismatic treasure this time, but perhaps that's inviting greed. Discarding those thoughts to the recesses of his mind, Thorian barreled toward his group with breathless speed. His massively upgraded agility now superseded that of most first advancement assassins. In mere seconds, he reached his destination. Surprised heads swiveled in his direction, taken aback by his abrupt arrival.
King, you've finally returned.
Ventus' exclamation pierced the silence, his broad smile radiating enthusiasm.
You're too late.
We've killed the guardian already.
It was a piece of cake.
Thorian couldn't help but scrunch his eyebrows at Ventus's remark. The words brimmed with assurance, in stark contrast to his tarnished appearance. His body was marred with charred spots. You say that, but your appearance tells a different story, Thorian voiced his concern.
What happened to you?
At his query, a hearty laugh burst forth from Saxum. His uncontrollable amusement painted a sharp contrast to Ventus, whose cheeks reddened like ripened apples. All the while, Thorian's confusion only deepened, his furrowed brows knitting closer together. It wasn't the guardian that cooked him like that, Forlun interjected with a chuckle. It was those traps in the maze. The idiot managed to trigger not 1, not 2, but 5 of those light blue rocks. I don't think he missed even one of them. I'm honestly impressed. Upon hearing Forlun's teasing account, Ventus could hardly contain his embarrassment.
Stop it. It's not like there was much of a difference.
Observing the playful banter, Thorian simply shook his head, a faint sigh easing past his lips. He then directed his gaze towards the treasure chest poised in the center. Regardless, since this isn't a matter of urgency, let us proceed with the distribution of rewards, Thorian interjected. He then veered his gaze towards Harold and inquired telepathically, have you been keeping track of everyone's kills and contributions? The alpha direwolf met his gaze, a broad grin pulling at his features. Indeed. Other than you, I've documented everyone's contributions. Upon hearing Harold's assured words, Thorian deferred the floor to him. Well then, why don't you announce those with the highest contributions? They will receive priority for the items, based on their ranking, he suggested. With a nod and a grunt, Harold maneuvered himself next to the golden chest. All eyes gravitated towards him, each gaze filled with intense anticipation for his announcement. The standings for this unique contest are as follows, the Alpha Direwolf began. I am in the top position with 126 points, adhering to the guidelines that Thorian set at the beginning. 10 of these points come from the Lightning Elemental Elite monster, and the rest were earned from slaying the monsters we encountered along the way. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd following Harold's proclamation of his victory. There were a few disgruntled grumbles too, but Harold remained impervious to them. His focus rested solely on the Moon Kobold. Forlun, you are in second place. You've amassed 98 points, all from monster kills. Upon hearing this declaration, Forlun's formerly disgruntled expression blossomed into a broad smile. Great job, boss. You've done exceptionally well. Bellifer congratulated, delivering a friendly pat on Forlun's back, which elicited a modest cough to conceal his delight. Well, it's only to be expected, Forlun retorted, his chest puffed out in pride, almost bursting from his chest plate. It's a shame I did not get to finish off neither the elite monster nor the guardian. I would have been first if things turned out differently. As Forlun enumerated his reasons, Harold turned his attention to the recipient of the third-place honor. Aqua, considering you dealt the final blow to the Lightning Prince, an additional 20 points have been added to your score. Thus, you take third place with a total of 83 points.
Ah, shit! You're so lucky!
Ventus exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger at the nonchalant Aqua.
You stole my spot. If I had waited just a second more to use my spells, I would have gotten that kill.
Oh well, too bad for you, Aqua shrugged. Unlike you, I knew exactly where and when to strike. Take it as a valuable life lesson. No sooner had Aqua's words landed, the wind around the group began to intensify and sparks of electricity ignited within Ventus' palm. Have you lost your mind, Ventus? Saxum swiftly grabbed Ventus' arms, effectively preventing him from casting his lightning arrow spell. The Sand Magus then turned a reproachful gaze to Aqua. And you too, Aqua. Quit stirring him up like that. But Aqua was not easily intimidated. I didn't provoke anyone. He's the one being immature, throwing a tantrum because he lost his precious little spot. All right, let's all take a breath, Thorian intervened, stepping between the two while letting out a resigned sigh. There's no reason for conflict. The types of items you both need are vastly different. This entire argument is pointless. Once he saw the tension between the two quarreling kobolds begin to dissipate, Thorian's gaze turned towards the treasure chest. More accurately, he was eyeing the king of the direwolves standing beside it. Harold, as the highest-scoring individual, you hold the right to choose any item from that chest first. However, I believe I have a proposal that might serve you better, Thorian announced, a knowing grin spreading across his face. Intrigued by these words, Harold quirked an eyebrow. And what might that proposal be? Well, that chest undoubtedly contains a wealth of valuable items. The issue, however, is that many will be class-locked, Thorian explained. Given that you don't possess a class, such items are off-limits. The items without class requirements are sparse, and they typically aren't as beneficial. As Thorian's explanation unfolded, Harold's brow furrowed. The realization that his hard work might result in no reward was clearly distasteful to him. That's why I have a better proposal, Thorian interjected, cutting through the Alpha Direwolf's discomfort with an encouraging smile. He then retrieved one of the skill crystals from his robe pocket and handed it to Harold. This is a skill crystal for mana manipulation. It isn't bound by any class requirement, allowing you to use it right away. If you dedicate proper time to mastering this skill, it may even pave the way to superior evolutions. Harold was dumbstruck as he stared at the skill crystal in Thorian's hand. He was so engrossed in reading the information on the skill crystal, which hovered before him, that he didn't respond to Thorian's words. Lucky him, Forlun grumbled, approaching Thorian and eyeing the skill crystal with undisguised avarice. I'd give anything for a skill like that. Upon hearing Forlun's candid admission, Thorian raised an eyebrow. Really? Are you yearning to be a spellslinging warrior?
Why not?
Forlun shrugged nonchalantly. Perhaps it might give me a unique class advancement, a warrior magician. You're a bit late for that, Thorian chuckled. You'd be better off learning the weapon mastery skill and dedicating your time to perfect it. If you do so, some truly powerful classes could become available to you. While Thorian was engaged in conversation with Forlun, Harold had finished reading the skill crystal's description and made up his mind. All right, I'll follow your advice. This skill sounds fascinating. I trust it won't let me down once I've acquired it. With that, Harold took the skill crystal in his mouth and bit down on it. The item shattered into countless blue fragments, each radiating an intense light. When the light subsided, neither the crystal nor its myriad pieces remained. You can experiment with it later, Thorian directed. For now, let's proceed with the item distribution. Forlun, your turn. I've been waiting for you to say that, the Moon Kobold responded, wrapping his golden chest plate with his fist before striding towards the treasure chest. After rifling through its contents, he drew out a pair of boots, a wide grin spreading across his face. I do like these little things. Upon examining the boots, Thorian immediately identified them as lightning boots. Quite a fortunate drop. If my memory serves right, it comes with an attached movement skill. Having watched Forlun make his choice, Thorian turned to Aqua. The blue kobold nodded, approaching the treasure chest to select a suitable item. Shortly, he emerged holding a yellow robe. I'll take this robe, Aqua declared. It enhances my mana and wind spells. Thorian's gaze instantly shifted to Ventus at those words. Predictably, the yellow kobold was seething. He was evidently mustering every ounce of his self-control to prevent himself from ranting about life's injustices. Well, at least he's learned to keep a lid on his tantrums. Once all three had made their selections, the competition had officially concluded. Thorian ambled over to the treasure chest to examine the remaining items, some ore, a skill scroll, and an alchemical recipe. Opting to inspect the skill scroll first, Thorian plucked it from the chest for a closer look. Thunderclap skill scroll. Class requirements Magus. Advancement requirement First advancement. Level requirement 1. Use bestows the active skill Thunderclap. This skill creates a loud, thunderous sound that disorients your enemies, leaving them momentarily stunned. Oh, it's just Thunderclap. Sighing at the underwhelming find, Thorian glanced back at the lightning Magus. Ventus, come here. Hearing those words, Ventus's demeanor rapidly shifted from disgruntlement to anticipation.
What is it, King? Do you have something for me?
Take this, Thorian extended the skill scroll to the yellow kobold. You're the only one in this group who can make use of it anyway. Without wasting a moment, Ventus snatched the scroll from Thorian's hand, hopping around like an ecstatic child on the eve of his birthday. Fearful someone might try to swipe it, Ventus immediately ripped open the parchment to assimilate the skill. Unfazed by Ventus's display, Thorian extracted the next item that piqued his interest, the alchemical recipe. Thunder's Boon Elixir Recipe. Skill requirements Alchemy 2. Material 2 Pulse Poppies 1 Heartroot. Description: this transformative drink could greatly boost one's cultivation. It can be used either to accelerate chi accumulation while meditating or help with the breakthrough to the foundational realm. However, due to its potent nature, it should be used sparingly or risk severe side effects like intense vertigo, vomiting, and chi disruption. Upon reading the description, Thorian's eyebrows shot up in surprise. I didn't expect to find this so soon. This would certainly help us speed through the first cultivation realm much faster than we could otherwise. This unexpected find slightly altered Thorian's plans. We need to invest more effort into alchemy. I have to find a truly gifted alchemist capable of advancing his skill to the second level as quickly as possible. His success rate should ideally exceed 40%, or we might end up exhausting more materials than we can afford. Despite foreseeing potential challenges, Thorian still wore a wide grin. These were the kinds of problems he relished, problems stemming from extraordinary success. After the final distribution of rewards, Thorian and his band of kobolds and direwolves began their departure from the lightning-infused dungeon. Emerging through the mystical portal, they found themselves back within the cold, damp cavern that marked the dungeon's entrance. That was quite the dungeon, Ifrit remarked, stretching her arms in satisfaction. I've gained so many levels, I've lost track. We need to do this as many times as we can. Couldn't have said it better, Forlun echoed her sentiment with a hearty chuckle. At this rate, I should evolve and reach my second advancement before the week's end. While Forlun and the other kobolds bantered playfully, Harold cracked a wide, toothy grin. Evolution, indeed. I should be ready for that in a couple of days. It's intriguing to ponder what form I might take. Hearing Harold's words, Thorian's interest was piqued. He immediately summoned his companion's status window to take a look. Status panel. Race Alpha Direwolf. Level 2235 EXP, 1356/6800. Lifespan 50 years. Stats. Strength 77. Agility 113. Constitution 79.
Mana 31.
Skills. Feral Leadership passive. Howl of the Lord active. Windleap active. Dirant active. Bestial State active. Mana Manipulation active. Observing Harold's progress, Thorian was unable to suppress a smile. Despite Harold not benefiting from dual leveling, his stats were strikingly similar to Thorian's. Since you're this close to your evolution, we should start training mana manipulation as soon as possible, Thorian remarked with a serious look. Grasping Thorian's logic, Harold responded with a nod, I'll follow your lead. I'm eager to discover what new possibilities this evolution might unlock. With their decisions made, Thorian and his companions set their course for the village. As they exited the cavern, the orange hues of dusk painting the sky marked the close of a strenuous day. While navigating through the dense woodland, Thorian decided to examine his own status screen. He had neglected it for some time and had experienced multiple level-ups in the interim. Display panel. Ding. Status panel. Race Flame Kobold. Level 2030th EXP, 3782/4400. Class Elemental Magus. Level 1740th EXP, 172/4200. Lifespan 40 years. Cultivation Realm Chi Gathering 4th Stage, 3.5%. Stats. Strength 78. Agility 110. Constitution 59.
Mana 100.
Chi 60. Free points 40. Regular skills. Minor Elemental Affinity passive. Flame Resistance passive. Elemental Synergy I passive. Dual Casting passive. Mana Manipulation active. Fireball active. Combustion Touch active. Waterball active. Windgust active. Rock Bullet active. Thunderclap active. Mist Veil active. Molten Shield active. Dust Devil active. Icy Barrage active. Druidic Dome active. Fire Pillar active. Wind Tornado active. Cultivation skills. Dark Flame Meditation. Dark Phoenix Flame Arts, first form Dark Flame Palm. Production skills. Blacksmith Eye. Alchemist Eye. Impressive progress indeed, Thorian reflected, a spark igniting in his eyes. Only my constitution and strength are lagging a bit. Given the surplus of points I have, I can afford to bolster them. Having determined his strategy, Thorian divided his 40 available points equally between the two stats. Strength 78-98. Constitution 59-79. A satisfied smile spread across Thorian's face as he observed his bolstered stats. However, as he delved further into his stat screen, almost trance-like, his expression morphed into one of realization. How could I have forgotten about that skill? Thorian chastised himself, biting his lower lip as he reviewed his 4 primary stats. I need all of them to reach the triple digits in order to unlock the Jack-of-all-trades skill. Recalling this skill and its prerequisites made Thorian wish he could smack himself for his oversight. If only he'd remembered earlier, he could have devised a more effective plan for allocating his free points. There's no point lamenting over past mistakes, Thorian shook off his self-reproach. I'm still in a position to unlock it before anyone else. My focus now should be on boosting my constitution stat. With a new strategy forming, Thorian set aside these thoughts for the time being. More pressing matters demanded his attention. I need to assess how the kobolds and orcs are faring, he thought. Once I've handled the internal affairs of the village, I can concentrate on mana manipulation training with Harold. In no time, the group found themselves back at the village. Thorian's first task was to circulate through the village and receive status reports from all 4 gates. Thankfully, nothing out of the ordinary had transpired during their time in the dungeon. The outer wall showed some cracks from monster attacks, but it remained intact. A considerable number of Kobloids had evolved into full-fledged kobolds, with only a few lagging behind in their evolution. The orcs, in their natural pace, steadily increased their levels and honed their skills by combating the monsters at the wall, much like the mature kobolds. Under Thorian's directives, the army units worked in rotation, felling trees in the space between the inner and outer wall. As the hours ticked by and the day came to a close, the area surrounding the territory altar was teeming with logs and lumber, matching if not exceeding the previous day's yield. Despite their smaller numbers, the civilian units also made headway. The blacksmithing team successfully forged 7 low-quality white mist swords, but their other attempts fell short and were subsequently smelted back into ingots. Conversely, the alchemists had no such recourse. Failed experiments led to irretrievable material losses, prompting them to be exceedingly cautious. If an experiment showed signs of going awry, they would promptly abort the process to minimize waste. Their meticulous approach yielded only 2 low-grade mana pills by day's end. Thorian made his customary rounds through the village. Upon reaching the territory altar, he converted some of the felled trunks into wood units and used them to repair the outer wall. Despite his army's competent defense, he was adamant about maintaining the wall's integrity. After all, the existing cracks could serve as potential breach points in the future. With the village maintenance tasks successfully completed, Thorian headed toward his dwelling where Harold was lounging by the entrance. Upon seeing Thorian approach, the alpha direwolf awakened and rose to his feet. "Is it finally time for our training?" Harold inquired with a soft growl. Thorian laughed lightly at his companion's impatience. "I apologize for the wait. There were a multitude of pressing matters that needed my attention." "It's part of being a leader," Harold shrugged nonchalantly. "But perhaps we should now concentrate on enhancing our own strength." Acknowledging Harold's point, Thorian motioned towards an open space in the village center. "Let's practice there. It's safer." Upon reaching the designated area, Thorian settled into a cross-legged position, with Harold seated beside him. "Mana originates from the heart," Thorian instructed, his body folded into the lotus pose. "That's its source, its reservoir." Inhaling deeply, Thorian turned his attention inward. Having recently transitioned into his feral body, he was still acclimating to its inner mechanics and nuances. For a moment, he even struggled to identify his own heart. After a quiet minute, Thorian finally reopened his eyes. "It barely qualifies as a mana heart. It's barely a nebulous collection of mana hovering aimlessly. This will be more challenging than I thought." Turning to his companion, Thorian was surprised to find Harold deeply engrossed. Although the direwolf hadn't yet grasped the concept of the mana thread, his earnest effort was nonetheless impressive. "That's the right mindset," Thorian thought approvingly. Silently, Thorian closed his eyes once again. He immersed himself in the depths of his being, attempting to comprehend the dynamics of mana within his flame kobold body. Thorian experienced a researcher's thrill. While he was thoroughly versed in the flow of mana within a human, this was his first opportunity to explore it from a monster's perspective. Those old geezers of the council would kill to get this chance. Thorian's concentration was unwavering. He delved into his internal systems, seeking to trace the root of his mana. He needed to understand how the cloud-like mana in his heart journeyed along the mana channels, making its way to his palm before it was actualized into a tangible spell. Time slipped away unnoticed, minutes merging into hours as Thorian and Harold persisted in their intense introspection. As the hours slipped by, Thorian summoned one spell after another. It wasn't in response to any imminent threat or assault, rather, he sought to understand the nuanced behavior of mana within his body as he performed his magic. As twilight gave way to a night sky adorned with countless stars, his aerial fireballs took on a mesmerizing quality. They were akin to spectacular fireworks, piercing the night with their radiant light. After a steady 2-hour engagement with his magic, Thorian finally started understanding the subtleties of wielding mana, unaided by the system's intervention. As he slowly opened his eyes, he could sense the accumulation of mana on his palm. It felt like he was clutching an enormous weight, an invisible force that cloaked his fist. It shouldn't be stronger than combustion touch or dark flame palm, but this is still some good progress. As Thorian attempted to translocate the amassed mana from his left hand to his right, it dissipated midway, reverting back to the gaseous cluster that encased his heart. "Seems like my previous life's skills and techniques haven't reincarnated with me," Thorian murmured with a sigh of resignation. "No matter, I've mastered mana once, I can surely do so again." Having reached a significant milestone in his journey of mana manipulation, Thorian turned to his side to find Harold, too, opening his eyes, concluding his meditation. Suddenly, the alpha direwolf leaped toward Thorian's house in a single bound, his speed and reach surpassing even the capabilities of Wind Leap. Upon reaching Thorian's house, Harold paused, looked back, and promptly raced back to his side. The tremendous velocity of the giant direwolf whipped up a gust of wind so powerful it nearly toppled Thorian. It seems that he has a knack for it. I think I've gotten the hang of this mana, Harold declared, surveying his body with a grin of accomplishment. It feels like I can amplify any part of my physique. It's an extraordinary enhancement to both my strength and my speed. That's indeed one way to harness mana, arguably, the simplest yet most effective, Thorian confirmed. In due course, you'll be able to manifest it externally. Similar to how you conjure your fireballs and tornadoes? Harold inquired with a spark of curiosity. Indeed, somewhat akin to that, Thorian replied, a wistful smile on his lips. However, to achieve that, you'll need to bind an element to the mana you're invoking. That might be a challenging feat to accomplish initially. It's probably best to concentrate on mastering body fortification and the arcane arts first. Arcane arts? Harold's eyebrows knitted together. What are those? Spells devoid of elements, Thorian elucidated. I wish I could demonstrate to give you a better understanding, but I've yet to master them myself. In a nutshell, they are long-range attacks devoid of any elements. Generally, they're weaker and less versatile than their elemental counterparts, but they offer excellent mana efficiency. You'd be hard-pressed to exhaust your mana by using them. Interesting, they seem ideal for me, Harold reflected. My mana reserves pale in comparison to yours, Magi. Utilizing these spells could mitigate that deficiency. Indeed, they very well could, Thorian agreed, nodding earnestly. However, I believe you should focus on perfecting body reinforcement for now. We can delve into the arcane arts tomorrow. With the training session with Harold concluded, Thorian made his way to the village hall. Even as he sauntered along, he continued his practice, transferring minuscule amounts of mana between his hands to familiarize his body with its flow. Upon entering the village hall, Thorian found Melina alone at her desk. As for the kobolds and kobolds, many were en route to the verdant labyrinth to complete their daily dungeon quests. I might need to build a proper warehouse soon. Items will accumulate very fast and become unmanageable if I don't do so. With these thoughts lingering in his mind, Thorian greeted the elven lady. Greetings, Melina. I trust your day was fruitful. Thank you for your concern, my lord. My day was indeed delightful, Melina responded, bowing lightly before raising her gaze to meet Thorian's. However, there's a matter I must bring to your attention. Thorian's brow furrowed at Melina's unexpected words. What might that news be? The gods are set to enforce some alterations to the territory system from tomorrow, Melina began. The changes are as follows: only citizens of the territory will be allowed to choose a class. Furthermore, the number of citizens permitted to choose a class will be limited. Statues will have a cap of 50, and first-level guilds will be restricted to 100. Upon hearing these words, Thorian raised an eyebrow before nodding. I nearly overlooked that requirement change. If memory serves, it did occur early on in my past life as well. Will these changes have any implications for our current structure? Thorian inquired. Despite being as closely connected with his army as possible, he didn't have an explicit rundown of all the numbers. At present, there's no issue. The warrior class could potentially face a challenge since we have 89 of them currently active. The other classes don't even reach the 50-member mark. Relieved by Melina's comforting words, Thorian exhaled slowly. That's heartening to hear. It would have deeply troubled me if many warriors were forced to change their classes, losing their hard-earned progress. The decision to refrain from rapid expansion had its merits, it seems. Contemplating further growth, Thorian found his thoughts drifting to a certain slender, green-skinned creature. I should seek him out and remind him of his earlier promise. With that course of action in mind, Thorian turned to Melina, delivering his final instruction. Melina, could you arrange for a daily document outlining the village's structure? I'd like a comprehensive overview, covering everything from the status of the buildings to the evolutions and levels of all combatants and citizens. Just as Thorian prepared to depart, Melina voiced her concern. My apologies, my lord, but I'm unable to venture far from the village hall. Gathering such extensive information would prove challenging. Acknowledging the elven lady's predicament, Thorian proposed a solution. I'll instruct the leaders of all military units to provide you with the necessary information at the end of each day. Your role would be to compile it effectively and filter it, so I can review it each morning." Hearing Thorian's proposed solution, Melina bowed slightly. "Thank you for your understanding, my lord. I shall execute as per your directive." Having concluded his task at the village hall, Thorian made his exit. As he cast a backward glance at the village, a smile crept onto his face, reflecting his inner musings. Isn't this structure turning Melina into a sort of minister for internal affairs? Perhaps her responsibilities are too narrow to warrant that title just yet. Nevertheless, it brings to mind the potential need for external affairs and intelligence-gathering structures. Such considerations flitted across Thorian's mind, yet he knew it was premature for such plans. He was still navigating an uncertain territory, unsure of what the future held. Would he form alliances with humans? Or would he concentrate on befriending monster kings? Could he potentially rule over both as a heavenly emperor? These weighty questions preoccupied him, and clear answers remained elusive. The next few months and years would inevitably shape the outcomes. Musing about months and years, when merely a few days have passed since my reincarnation. I'm truly getting ahead of myself. Thus, Thorian set about his duties around the village gates, instructing each unit leader to report back to Melina by day's end. As Nox was in a comatose state and recuperating within Whisperwind's guild, Ifrit assumed his duties as the head of his unit. After addressing all the gates and finally arriving at the southern one, Thorian relayed the same instructions to Zogthar that he had given to the other leaders. Once finished, he scanned the area for the diminutive goblin. However, rather than the timid figure he anticipated, Thorian was taken aback by the sight of Brix's evolved form. He had grown taller, resembling the hobgoblin warriors. Yet, unlike the half-naked, robust warriors, Brix remained somewhat frail, swathed in a lengthy, grubby yellow robe. "Where did you get that robe?" Thorian asked, intrigued.
"Oh, this?"
Brix glanced at his robe with a proud grin. "It appeared during my evolution, master. I woke up to find myself clothed in it." "Is that so? Even evolution can equip clothing?" "I guess the saying stands true, the more you live, the more you learn." After listening to Brix's unexpected response, Thorian cleared his throat and complimented the goblin. "You look impressive. Have you finally come to resemble the shaman elder you aspired to be?"
"I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close, master."
Brix replied cheerfully. "I'm currently an apprentice shaman. I'll become a true goblin shaman with my next evolution." "That's excellent news," Thorian nodded, sharing in Brix's enthusiasm. "Now, as to why I sought you out. Are you still willing to uphold the promise you made to me at the beginning?" Brix looked puzzled for a moment before a spark of realization illuminated his eyes. "Ah, you're referring to introducing you to my tribe?" "Absolutely, master.
We can visit them whenever you wish."
Aware of the prior direwolf scouting mishap, Thorian made a calculated decision to delay his and Brix's departure. He chose to wait until all units had returned safely from their dungeon escapades before venturing forth. Once all were accounted for, Thorian and Brix embarked on their trek. Navigating their way through the perilous wilderness, Thorian seized the opportunity to learn more about his companion. He broached the subject with a question. "So, Brix, could you elaborate on your tribe? How expansive is it, and what is its organizational structure?" Brix pondered Thorian's inquiry, scratching his chin before replying. "Well, I use the term tribe loosely. It's more a unison of several tribes. Collectively, I'd say there are upwards of 500 members, maybe even nearing 1,000. But given the recent events of the past 2 days, I suspect that many may have died. So the current count could be less than 500. Thorian was somewhat taken aback by Brix's casual acknowledgement of the recent fatalities. He couldn't help but respond, "You're rather nonchalant about it. Does the loss of your kinsmen not affect you?" Brix shrugged, displaying a stark pragmatism. "Crying about them serves no purpose, master. As a goblin, you become all too familiar with death. It's always a factor in our lives. Sometimes, that's a good thing, because you get to choose which corpse you will have to eat and which one you will get to bury." Brix's candid disclosure caught Thorian off guard. He found himself momentarily at a loss for words, his face a mask of surprised disquiet. "I thought I was a jaded man, but it seems I'm still a bit soft." Sensing Thorian's shock, Brix tactfully shifted the conversation. "Master, as for the structure of the tribes, it's ruled by the Council of Elders at the helm. They are followed by the goblin champions, then the hobgoblin chiefs, and finally the normal goblins. Thorian, managing to dispel his previous unsettling thoughts, nodded in understanding at Brix's detailed explanation. So, it's a straightforward hierarchical organization. This simplification could be advantageous to us, as we only need to negotiate directly with this Council of Elders. Brix's voice trailed off, his tone hinting at complications. It might not be as easy as it sounds, Master. Intrigued, Thorian prompted him to elaborate. And why might that be? With a slightly apprehensive expression, Brix scratched the back of his neck before venturing into his explanation. The Council of Elders live in the largest cave, situated deep within the goblin territory. To have an audience with them, we must go past the hundreds of goblins guarding them. Essentially, they have a security perimeter, Thorian deduced. Exactly, Master. When I was last with them, the hobgoblin chiefs hadn't had the chance to construct any proper sheds. They were living in hollowed trees and bushes, just like us normal goblins, Brix elaborated with a hint of enthusiasm. However, it's been a few days since then. I assume they've now established some form of shelter and fortified their defenses. Thorian couldn't help but smile at Brix's assessment. The ingenuity of goblins never ceases to amaze me. Among all lower-level species, they truly stand out as one of the most, if not the most, intelligent. Thorian's compliments elicited a jubilant response from Brix, who scratched his nose in delight. A wordless smile spread across his face, expressing his happiness more eloquently than any verbal response. Observing his subordinate's joy, Thorian returned the smile, his eyes filled with pride. He then guided the conversation towards a more pressing concern. However, this situation could pose a problem for us. Will these chieftains allow us passage? Or will we have to use force? Brix dismissed Thorian's concern with a shake of his head, puffing out his chest in a show of confidence. Since I am now a shaman apprentice, they would be insane to try and make things hard for us. If they do and they are found out by the champions and the elders, we don't even have to say or do anything, the higher-ups would kill them on their own. Hearing Brix's words, Thorian looked at him with interest. I see, so a shaman apprentice is higher in the hierarchy than a hobgoblin chief. The more I learn about these goblins, the more intriguing they seem. The duo proceeded onwards through the dense foliage. After a brisk half-hour trek, the distant sounds of movement alerted them to their proximity to their destination. Sharing a glance, they silently acknowledged their arrival at the target location. As they ventured deeper into the tangled forest, the haunting cries of the nocturnal wildlife echoed eerily around them. The uncanny luminescence of bioluminescent flora lent an ethereal aura to the environment. The cacophony of the goblin language, a discordant blend of grunts, shrieks, and squeaks, filtered through the thicket, signaling their proximity to the goblin settlement. We're close, Brix murmured, his eyes, acclimated to the darkness, scanned the dimly lit underbrush. His gaze sparkled with a subdued gleam of anticipation. It appears so, Thorian replied in a hushed tone. As they ventured closer, the hubbub intensified, and the rudimentary signs of goblin habitation came into view. A crude barricade fashioned from thorny bushes and fallen tree limbs delineated the boundary of the goblin territory. Abruptly, two hobgoblin chiefs materialized from the obscurity, their grotesque silhouettes vaguely discernible. One was lanky, brandishing a rudimentary spear, while his companion, more robustly built, wielded a long sword. Their eyes glowed with an ominous light as they leveled their weapons at the newcomers. A volley of harsh squawks and piercing shrieks erupted from them, constituting an unmistakable warning. Thorian might not have understood their language, but their hostile intent was unambiguous. Leave this part to me, Master, Brix stepped forward, raising his hands in a non-threatening manner. He barked back a series of responses in their native tongue. His tones were confident and composed, a stark contrast to the hobgoblin's aggressive posture. It seems he got more of a spine now that he had evolved. Thorian watched Brix with interest. He had never before witnessed such assertiveness from the goblin. Following a moment of tense standoff, the hobgoblin chiefs unanticipatedly lowered their weapons. Their faces mirrored surprise, quickly replaced by mild disdain as they grunted and spat aside. Following a few more unintelligible grunts, they turned, beckoning for the duo to follow them. Despite the residual hostility emanating from the hobgoblins, Thorian couldn't suppress a chuckle. Their brusque manners were, in their own way, quite amusing. So, even though they have to respect the hierarchy and tradition, it doesn't mean that they have to like it. Very interesting behavior. As Thorian and Brix ventured deeper into goblin territory, they encountered scores of the green-skinned beings. Most were scattered about, sprawled on the ground in states of visible fatigue and starvation, too drained to do much else. A handful managed to carry out tasks, moving supplies from one location to another. Yet even these seemingly industrious goblins appeared gaunt and malnourished, their protruding ribs evidence of their dire condition. Thorian's gaze was involuntarily drawn towards a goblin hidden behind a tree, voraciously consuming an indistinguishable piece of meat. As he followed the scene down, he spotted 2 green feet jutting out from behind the tree. His stomach roiled at the implication. Bricks, following Thorian's line of sight, wore a grave expression. "These are desperate times, master. When hunger gnaws, we goblins don't have the luxury of choosing our meals. 2 rules apply here: let the family mourn for a day and do the deed in secret, and do it away from prying eyes. That's what the elder always told me, and that's what I heard my whole life." Thorian swallowed, his face etched with a grim expression. That's a horrifying way of life. As the harsh realities of goblin existence hit him, his mind began to wander, recalling instances of similar desperation among his own kind. Yet humans aren't above such acts in desperation. As they ventured further into the open area, Thorian's gaze was drawn to a group of goblins huddled around a fire. Overseen by a hefty hobgoblin, the group was busily roasting a freshly hunted deer. The scene offered a stark contrast to the covert act of cannibalism he had witnessed moments ago. Why the discrepancy in meals? Thorian queried, a crease of confusion marring his brow. Although he had a conjecture of his own, he desired to hear the explanation from the goblin himself. "Master, I have negotiated the terms of our deal with them. They seem intrigued by our ability to develop strong soldiers quickly, but they are skeptical of my claims." Brick stammered, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he continued, "They wish to verify the validity of my statements by assessing your strength." "Oh, so they want to test me?" Thorian raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Sure, how do they plan to do that? And what do we stand to gain in return?" Seeing that Thorian was not offended, Brix took a deep breath, visibly relieved. "They propose a duel with one of the goblin champions. Should you win, master, one of their 3 tribes will submit to us. We would gain the allegiance of 1 shaman elder, 2 champions, half a dozen hobgoblins, and 100 or so regular goblins." Quite an impressive outcome for a first negotiation, Thorian nodded, patting Brix on the shoulder, his face reflecting both satisfaction and pride. "I'm impressed by what you've accomplished, Brix. This progress is more than I had anticipated." His words were measured, but the warmth in Thorian's eyes conveyed a genuine respect for his subordinate's efforts. Brix laughed and scratched the back of his head in jubilation, his face glowing with modesty. "Ah, master, I don't deserve such praise. I was just doing my job." Thorian's smile widened slightly, his eyes flicking back to the smiling elder shaman. Their eyes locked for a fleeting moment before Thorian turned his attention back to Brix. "There's one thing I wanted to ask. That shaman with the golden eyes, are you familiar with his patron deity?" "Oh, Elder Omen?" Brix paused to regard the shaman in question. "Yes, I am very familiar with him. The goddess he follows is the goddess of knowledge, Shora." "Shora, huh?" Thorian thought, scratching his chin with an intrigued smile. "Interesting." One of the goblin champions stood up, spear in hand, and walked confidently toward Thorian. The rest of the council also rose from their makeshift stone chairs, signaling the end of the negotiation meeting. The goblin champion who approached Thorian barked some words at him in his native tongue, but Thorian could not understand them. He turned toward Brix and gestured for an explanation. "He is saying that he will be the one to duel you," Brix explained, his voice even. "As for the rest, I believe it too rude to translate." Thorian chuckled at Brix's latter words before turning and gesturing toward the exit of the cave. "Tell him to come outside. We need some space for this duel." The shaman apprentice quickly translated Thorian's words, and the goblin champion followed him. As Thorian exited the cave and walked into the clearing, he looked up at the sky to find it devoid of clouds. The stars twinkled, and the 2 moons stood side by side, illuminating the earth below. It was a wondrous and beautiful sight, and for a moment, Thorian was lost in its majesty. Snapping back to reality, he saw that the goblins around had scattered, leaving a large circular space for the upcoming duel. Thorian glanced back only to see the goblin champion with his spear at the ready. The goblin's cape fluttered with the wind, imbuing him with an aura of charisma rarely seen among the rest of his kin. "Not too bad. That is a good stance." Seeing his opponent ready to commence the duel, Thorian turned toward Brix and advised, "Keep an eye out and be ready to heal him should he become severely injured. He is a future friend after all." Understanding Thorian's words, the apprentice shaman nodded. He then spoke some words to the goblin champion that Thorian could not comprehend. Suddenly, the goblin champion burst into motion, signaling the start of the fight. He covered a distance of 10 meters with his spear in less than a second, a blur of deadly intent. Anticipating this level of speed, Thorian's hands flickered with red flames. With a deft movement, he deflected the head of the incoming spear with his combustion touch. A cone of flames engulfed the spear's tip, sending it reeling backward before the champion regained his balance. With a quick flick of his wrist, the goblin doused the flames atop the spear, his eyes gleaming with fierce determination. Choosing to give himself some space, Thorian coated his feet with mana before rushing backward. While crude, this technique allowed him to enhance his acceleration and agility. However, just as Thorian created some distance, the goblin champion burst forth with a strong red aura. This swirling energy condensed and concentrated on the goblin's feet and the haft of his spear, intensifying the aura of menace that surrounded him. The champion's fierce eyes seemed to burn with the same red glow, promising a battle that would not be easily won. An aura master? No, an intermediate user. Aware of the barrage of strikes that an aura user was capable of, Thorian immediately conjured a wind gust with his right hand and a fireball with his left. Thank the gods for dual casting. With that thought, Thorian hurled the two spells at the incoming goblin champion. As had happened many times before, the two skills merged into one, creating a wave of flames that engulfed the enemy. However, Thorian didn't take even a fraction of a second to breathe or anticipate the outcome. He immediately rushed toward the flaming wave as it crashed upon the goblin champion, his hand swirling with flames. As Thorian expected, a deep blood-red spot appeared within the orange flames before the goblin champion burst out of the inferno. But just as he cracked through the first tongues of fire, he found himself face to face with Thorian, who was ready to strike, his eyes alight with the same intense flame as his magic. Boom! With his hands ablaze, Thorian struck the goblin champion's solar plexus, engulfing him in the fire of combustion touch. The goblin let out a cry as he released his grip on the spear, sent flying back into the raging flames behind him. But before the champion could suffer truly devastating burn injuries, Thorian acted with swift compassion. He rushed in and pulled the goblin out of the inferno, feeling the heat scorch his own skin in the process. Then, he too jumped away from the fire, conscious of the embers that clung to him, a painful reminder of the duel's intensity. Flame resistance is miraculous, but it's not flame immunity. I still need to be careful. At the same time, Brix immediately rushed to assist the injured goblin champion. The goblin's green skin was charred in several places, with raw flesh showing through the burns. While Brix began his healing efforts, one of the shaman elders approached and joined in, casting his own spells. Green energy enveloped the goblin champion's body, and the onlookers watched in awe as his injuries rapidly healed, the charred and damaged skin giving way to a renewed vitality. That is some fairly high-level healing around a first advancement priest. It could be even slightly higher. While Brix and the elder were healing the champion, Thorian surveyed the council. Some of the goblins looked on in awe, others in fear. Yet Thorian was undeterred. Gone were the expressions of disdain, contempt, or indifferent neutrality that had marked their faces before. Good, he thought to himself, know my power. Know the power of the one who is to be your king. Soon, the goblin champion had fully recovered. He sprang to his feet and rejoined the rest of the goblins, his body a testament to the shaman's skill. Brix and the council then resumed their conversation, presumably to conclude the matters of the negotiation. After some quick, decisive talk, several members of the council began to make their way back into the cave, their manner reflecting a new sense of respect and understanding. Brix rushed to Thorian's side and explained, Master, they want us to return to the cave to discuss matters more privately. It wouldn't be wise to hold the conversation where other goblins could see and listen. Thorian understood Brix's logic but did not respond immediately. Instead, his gaze settled on the elder with golden eyes who was walking alongside the rest of the council toward the entrance of the cave. Elder Omn, Thorian called out, causing the elder to stop in his tracks. I know that you can understand me. Why don't we have a talk? Just the two of us. The elder did not respond to Thorian at once. He looked around at the rest of the council and spoke with them in his native tongue. Only then, when all the council members had stopped, did the elder turn to face Thorian, his expression softening into a smile. The golden hue that had been covering his eyes earlier had vanished, revealing their natural amber color. How? Elder Omn questioned, his voice tinged with curiosity. What made you believe I understood your tongue, King of the Kobolds? Your patron deity is Shora, so I could only guess as much, Thorian explained before smoothly changing the subject. Beyond that, what do you say to a better deal than the one my friend has offered you? Elder Omn's eyebrow arched in interest at the proposition. And what might that deal be? Right now, one of the 3 tribes that constitute your coalition will serve under my leadership as per the terms of our negotiations. This would leave the other 2 tribes in a much weaker state than they were previously, Thorian began, laying out his rationale. What I propose is a more equitable arrangement. I will fight against all of your champions simultaneously, and if I win, you all shall serve me. If I lose, then our previous deal is nullified, and the 3 tribes may remain together. Brix squinted at the group around the fire. That's an elite pack, Master. They are led by a hobgoblin. They have the strength and skill to hunt larger game, while other groups aren't so lucky. Their kills are divided shares for the elders, the champions, and the pack. The rest is left to the family of the pack, if there's any left, that is. Treachery. The squeaking noises yanked Thorian's attention back to the 2 hobgoblin chiefs in the lead. They stood before a large cave entrance, barricaded by an arrangement of tree trunks and bushes. As the more robust of the 2 hobgoblins nudged a log aside, it revealed a pathway into the cavern. Once the path was opened, the bullier hobgoblin turned to Brix, addressing him in their goblin tongue. Following a brief exchange, Brix, now eye level with Thorian's shoulder, tilted his head upwards to meet his master's gaze. They wish to know the purpose of our meeting with the elders. What should I relay, Master? Upon hearing Brix's query, Thorian took a moment to contemplate his response. Our objective is clear, to discuss the assimilation of the goblin tribe into my village. He then swept his gaze around the open space, taking in the sorry state of the goblins before continuing. Under my leadership, they will not have to suffer hunger. And certainly, they won't need to resort to consuming the dead bodies of their brethren. After Thorian's declaration, Brix remained silent. The newly evolved goblin lowered his gaze for a few moments, then raised his eyes to meet Thorian's, displaying a certain apprehension. Master, may I share my thoughts? Thorian's brows knitted together in mild surprise before he replied, Speak your mind. I don't believe this approach will work, Brix confessed, choosing his words with difficulty. Neither the elders nor the champions truly care for the conditions of the goblins. What they care about is themselves. Taking a moment to absorb Brix's comment, Thorian raised an eyebrow. You're saying that as long as they receive their share, they don't truly care? That seems surprisingly short-sighted. Brix looked back at the cave entrance, his hand trembling slightly. The elders and the champions are strong. They don't have to worry about the monsters, even if the weaker goblins die. Gobelin champion, They should be slightly weaker than my unit commanders. After a brief pause for thought, Thorian realized that the intricacies of goblin culture were completely beyond him. Based on the information he had, he could not have guessed the true desires and needs of the elders and champions. Struck by a daring idea, Thorian turned back to his goblin friend with a smile. Brix, I find myself lacking a deep understanding of the subtleties of your culture. As you are the one most familiar with these elders and champions, I hereby appoint you as the liaison for our village's negotiations with them. I trust you won't disappoint me. As Thorian spoke, Brix's mouth opened wider and wider, eventually reaching its limit. He was stuck in a frozen expression for a few seconds before shaking his head vehemently. No, Master, I cannot do such a thing. This is such an important matter, someone like me could never have the honor to be entrusted with such a task. What honor? Thorian raised an eyebrow, his voice cool. This is simply an order. Are you saying that you cannot fulfill it? Seeing Thorian's implacable expression, Brix gulped before slowly nodding. No, I did not mean that. If it's the Master's command, I can do anything. Thorian's expression softened, and his frown transformed into a smile. Good, then I expect nothing less than perfection. In your negotiations, you can offer them a position as high as a unit commander. Nothing higher, do you understand? I will make sure to do so, Master, Brix nodded, determination in his eyes. Thus, Brix engaged in conversation with the bulky-looking hobgoblin once more. After a few exchanges, the hobgoblin chief disappeared into the cave to relay Brix's message. The duo waited alongside the slender hobgoblin at the entrance for around 10 minutes before the more robust hobgoblin re-emerged. After conferring with Brix for a brief moment, the latter turned to Thorian and announced, They have accepted our request for a meeting. We may enter now. With that, the duo made their way into the mouth of the cave. Instead of the muscular hobgoblin, it was the lean chief who guided them inside. As they ventured further, the stark daylight of the outside world gave way to a torchlit tableau of amber and shadow. The flickering flames of the torches danced upon the uneven cave walls, painting a mystical scene that hinted at the unfamiliar world they were about to encounter. A primitive barricade marked the cave's entrance, thorny undergrowth and stone, goblin logic of defense. The crunch of packed dirt and gravel underfoot echoed alongside distant water drips and the muted chatter of goblins. The cave's heart opened to a grand chamber, torchlit and shadow-ridden. Crude symbols and figures adorned the nearby walls, etchings of roots and pathways illuminated by clusters of torches. Hints of goblin existence were scattered around, simple sleeping pallets, makeshift weapons, food scraps. At the center of the chamber, a flat stone sat surrounded by smaller rocks, a raw and makeshift council table. The champions and elders were gathered around it, all focused on Thorian and Bricks as they entered. As the two approached the main gathering, their lanky guide positioned himself to the side, not daring to join them. His spear was held at the ready, prepared for any sudden altercation, while his eyes continuously scanned Thorian and Bricks for signs of hostility. The air was thick with tension and anticipation as the important meeting was about to commence. Thorian paid no heed to the hobgoblin guide. In the grand scheme of things, he was insignificant. Instead, Thorian's eyes roamed curiously over the council leading this amalgamation of tribes. Among them were 3 shamanic elders, their lean frames, tribalistic clothing, and magical auras revealing the nature of their esteemed positions. The champions, by contrast, looked more athletic. 6 in number, half were armed with spears, the other half with long swords. They resembled stronger and more muscular versions of the hobgoblin chiefs, but were distinguished by far superior weapons and clothing. Thorian's contemplation was interrupted as he felt a sudden stop beside him. Turning, he saw Bricks freezing up momentarily, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Take the lead," Thorian commanded softly, placing his hand on Brix's shoulder, a reassuring gesture to both comfort his subordinate and hide his emotion from the council. "You are the master here now. You are the master of negotiation, behave as such." Taking a small breath to steady his nerves, Bricks stepped forward, leaving Thorian behind him, and immediately launched into his speech. Even though Thorian could not understand the words, he appreciated the tone and volume. The young goblin shaman apprentice was commanding the room with his voice. It was just loud enough to be properly heard but not so much that it seemed like compensation for a lack of confidence. Observing his subordinate's demeanor, Thorian nodded to himself with a smile, his thoughts affirming, "Good. Speak your mind loud and clear, Bricks, you have me at your back." The discussion began on a fairly hostile note, with some of the champions scoffing and taunting the young Bricks. But the shaman apprentice did not let their jeers deter him. He held steadfast, countering their derision with confident and well-chosen words. Thorian, having already granted Bricks full freedom to negotiate as he saw fit, found that there was little for him to do. He simply stood at the back, a silent pillar of support, as he watched the whole scene unfold, his eyes reflecting both pride and anticipation. The initial animosity in the room gradually began to ease, giving way to serious discussion as Bricks continued to demonstrate his unexpected poise and conviction. As the negotiations wore on, Thorian's eyes continued to scan the members of the Goblin Council. Their faces reflected a mixture of emotions, confusion, fear, hostility, all of which Thorian had anticipated. However, as his gaze moved from one goblin to the next, it lingered on a specific elder. The elder shaman was smiling at Thorian, his eyes shining with a mysterious golden light. Thorian's mind raced. Mana eyes? No, perhaps eyes of truth? He pondered, momentarily distracted. He then glanced at Bricks, who was fully engaged in the negotiation, and thought, I must ask him about that elder later. I need to know his patron deity. Unwilling to interrupt his subordinate during this crucial task, Thorian kept his thoughts to himself and adopted a more laid-back stance. The discussion continued between Bricks and the champions, with the elders occasionally interjecting their thoughts. Of the 3 elders, 2 maintained fairly neutral expressions while speaking. Only the shaman with the golden eyes engaged with Bricks, his demeanor gentle, his soft smile reminiscent of a grandfather's affectionate regard for a favored grandson. Minutes quickly passed and the negotiations reached a fevered pitch. As the champions conferred among themselves, Bricks turned to Thorian, his voice hushed and urgent. Thorian's words hung in the air, a bold offer that went beyond traditional negotiation. Elder Omn's eyes widened in both fear and shock at the proposal. Master Bricks began, attempting to interrupt the heavy silence, but a cold look from Thorian stopped him dead in his tracks. Only after Brix fully backed away did Thorian turn his attention back to the elder, whose initial shock had now dissipated. "Well then, that is an absolutely delightful deal," Elder Oemon mused with a chuckle. "But King of the Kobolds, might you be a little hasty with this proposition? As a king, you should know that wisdom often reaches farther than might." "You do not have to worry about me," Thorian chuckled in response, his eyes twinkling with a self-assured glint. "Simply discuss this matter with the rest of your council and return to me with a positive response." Without uttering a word, Elder Oemon smiled and nodded, his eyes reflecting understanding. He then turned to the rest of his council and began to explain Thorian's bold proposition. Meanwhile, Brix approached Thorian, concern evident in his voice. "Master, I'm sorry if I'm overstepping my boundaries, but is this truly wise? The champions are strong, will you be able to defeat all of them?" "Brix, never show fear or weakness to anyone outside our own," Thorian warned, his voice firm but not unkind. He then looked back at his prospective opponents, confidence unwavering. "As for the champions, it will be a decent fight, but I will win." As Elder Oemon relayed Thorian's challenge to the assembled elders and champions, a cacophony of outraged shouts and guttural protests erupted. However, with a commanding presence, Elder Oemon quickly quelled the uproar. Gradually, expressions of disdain transformed into anticipatory smiles, their eyes glinting with the prospect of an unexpected opportunity. After a brief deliberation, Elder Oemon approached Thorian, his face breaking into a grin. "The council has accepted your challenge. Should you triumph over all our champions, we will pledge our loyalty and serve without question. The remaining terms will remain as we previously negotiated with young Brix." Thorian nodded appreciatively. A wise decision. He then surveyed the surroundings. Goblins and their towering hobgoblin chiefs had already formed a large ring around them, eager witnesses to the unfolding drama. The arena had been sufficient for his duel with the spear-wielding champion, but now, facing multiple adversaries, its expanse seemed inadequate. "Have your men back away more," Thorian instructed, gesturing to the throng of goblins that surrounded them. "I can't guarantee their safety if they stand so close." Elder Oemon's eyes followed Thorian's gesture, and he nodded in understanding. "Indeed, your spells might prove too devastating for them." At the mention of his magical prowess, Thorian raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You know about my spells?" "You just too much, King of the Kobolds," the elder replied with a light chuckle. "There's no need to feign ignorance about my abilities." Thorian responded with a chuckle of his own, but his eyes soon drifted toward the goblin champions. They were cracking their necks and adopting fighting stances, their bodies a coiled spring of anticipation, readying themselves for the battle to come. The air crackled with a tangible tension as both sides prepared for a clash that promised to be both fierce and unforgettable. Following Thorian's focused gaze, Elder Oemon nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Well then, shall we commence this sacred duel?" "I am ready at your signal," Thorian responded, his voice steady and firm. With a decisive wave, Elder Oemon commanded the goblins and the hobgoblin chiefs to retreat further, widening the makeshift arena. It was only once they had moved back, vanishing into the dense shadows of the surrounding forest, that Thorian felt satisfied with the space allotted for the duel. The tension of anticipation hung heavy in the air as final preparations were made. Elder Oemon put some distance between Thorian and the group of poised champions. Then, with a loud, resonant shout that echoed through the clearing, he signaled the start of the fight. Boom! The 6 champions, bodies enveloped in a fierce red aura, dashed toward Thorian with breathtaking speed. The very ground beneath them seemed to shudder, and their first step left small craters in their wake, evidence of their ferocious might. Faced with the assault of the armed champions converging on him from all directions, Thorian invoked a spell he had kept hidden in his arsenal until now. Mist Veil. The air around Thorian instantly became hazy as a thick white fog materialized, enveloping him and obscuring the champion's vision. As they attempted to penetrate this magical barrier, their bodies suddenly decelerated, the momentum arrested by an unseen force. They began to grunt and moan as the sizzling hot air within the mist seared their skin. Within seconds, they all retreated from the mist, expressions twisted in confusion and pain. They had lost sight of Thorian, and they realized the futility of searching for him within an area where they were vulnerable to constant damage. As the white mist gradually dissipated, Thorian's figure began to emerge. The flame kobold seemed unscathed, his eyes alight with focus. Just as the goblin champions could make out his form, Thorian snapped his fingers. A thundering roar resonated through the clearing, the shockwave of sound nearly deafening the goblin champions. Instinctively, they covered their ears and fell to their knees, overcome by the jarring intensity of Thorian's thunderclap spell. Seizing the moment of advantage, Thorian began casting one of his more advanced spells. The winds surrounding the disoriented, green-skinned champions started to shift wildly, gaining speed with each spiraling rotation. Within moments, a full-fledged tornado had formed, its powerful currents sucking the bodies of the goblin champions into its vortex. Thorian's eyes narrowed as his spell reached full power, preparing to launch his next assault. Just as he was about to mentally command his Fire Pillar spell, he abruptly halted midcast. Damn, I almost killed my future commanders in haste, he realized, a sudden clarity washing over him. Drawing a deep breath, regret and realization etched on his face, Thorian surveyed the tempest he had summoned. True to its rank as a first advancement spell, the tornado ensnared all 6 champions, its razor-sharp gusts slicing through their flesh, causing thick purple blood to seep from numerous wounds. Yet, from the whirlwind's chaotic core, a brilliant yellow flash burst forth. Accompanied by a deafening roar, a goblin champion emerged, his form cloaked in an electrifying aura. Propelled by a powerful kick, he broke free from the tornado's grasp, hurtling toward Thorian like a bolt of lightning. Sword drawn and gleaming menacingly, he seemed intent on liberating Thorian's head from his shoulders. En élémental aura? Marvelous. Thorian wanted to admire the goblin champion's electrifying display, but he knew he couldn't afford such indulgence. With practiced efficiency, he employed dual casting, summoning a protective druid dome around him and materializing a molten shield close to his body. In the blink of an eye, the goblin champion thrust through the wooden dome with a lightning-infused burst. His sword collided with the molten shield, forcing Thorian back a couple of steps. Yet, the goblin champion's assault was relentless. He lunged forward again, sword raised high, prepared to unleash a horizontal slash. Thorian, however, remained composed, his keen eyes tracking every subtle movement of his opponent. As the goblin leaped into the air, Thorian spotted a slight shift in his shoulders, a telltale lowering of his center of gravity. It's a feint. Recognizing the champion's true intention, Thorian leaped into the air, deftly maneuvering his molten shield into place just in time to ward off the goblin's unexpected rising diagonal slash. Crack! Thorian's lava shield splintered into fragments, unable to endure 2 successive aura-powered strikes from the formidable goblin. The shockwave propelled Thorian backward, but he skillfully rode the momentum, putting some distance between himself and his relentless foe. Taking a brief moment to survey the battlefield, Thorian's gaze was drawn to the area where his tornado had once raged. The spell had dissipated, freeing the 5 remaining champions who were now charging forward to support their comrade. With a click of his tongue, Thorian regarded the determined goblin champion before him, a note of regret in his thoughts. I wanted to spar with you some more, but it seems I must finish our duel prematurely. As Thorian's feet touched the ground, he tapped into a reservoir of energy he hadn't accessed in this lifetime, the core of his lower abdomen. Fiery power surged along a hidden path, enveloping his body before culminating in his palms. The flames that danced around his hands were not the usual red, they were tinged with a mysterious purple hue. Dark Flame Palm, let's see how good you are. Infusing mana into his right foot, Thorian charged at the lightning-imbued goblin with all the speed he could muster. The champion, momentarily taken aback by the unusual flames, recovered swiftly to block Thorian's palm strike. Yellow lightning clashed with purple flame, creating a spectacle of radiant beauty as the 2 energies battled for dominance. Thorian wasted no time, unleashing a relentless flurry of attacks against his opponent. The battle's momentum shifted as the goblin champion was forced onto the defensive, parrying and dodging as best he could. He knew that a single misstep could prove disastrous against Thorian's potent strikes, but also that his fellow champions were closing in. In a matter of seconds, they would join the fray, and the advantage would swing back in his favor. Thorian sensed this strategic calculation but remained unfazed. His heart did not waver, his mind clear and focused. His class, Elemental Magus, held its reputation as one of the most formidable for a reason. Dust Devil. The wind shifted once more at Thorian's command, sending a foreboding chill through the advancing goblin champions. Pebbles, sand, and blades of grass were swept up into a whirling vortex, forming a barrier of nature's fury. Though smaller than the tornado that had ensnared them earlier, the Dust Devil still served as a significant deterrent. The 5 champions halted, looking for ways to circumvent the spell and reach their embattled comrade on the other side. With his other opponents momentarily held at bay, Thorian's focus narrowed, honing in on the lightning-clad champion. The goblin's face twisted into an ugly grimace as he looked at the Dust Devil Thorian had summoned. You shouldn't be so distracted. Pausing his relentless assault, Thorian suddenly halted, standing still for a brief moment. The goblin champion was taken aback at first, confusion flickering across his face. But as his eyes locked with Thorian's, a realization clearly dawned, and his expression went ashen. With a calm and deliberate motion, Thorian snapped his fingers. The instant Thorian snapped his fingers, a thunderous roar reverberated through the air, disorienting his opponent. Caught off guard, the hobgoblin champion, clad in flickering lightning, instinctively covered his ears. Seizing the moment, Thorian lunged forward, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. His eyes met those of the hobgoblin, and the scant inches that separated them filled with an electric tension. Unleashing a rapid-fire series of strikes, Thorian's palms, ablaze with ethereal, purple flames, seared the flesh of his opponent with each devastating impact. He concluded his frenetic assault with a precisely executed uppercut, catapulting the champion into the roiling tempest of the Dust Devil. However, respite eluded Thorian. Before he could even draw another breath, a torrent of foes surged toward him from either side, their aura-imbued blades gleaming with deadly intent. With a fluid grace, Thorian parried the onslaught, his hands still aflame, warding off swords and spears that sought to claim his life. Each deflected blow forced him a step backward, but he calculated every movement to ensure his enemies remained squarely within his field of vision. He would not be so easily outflanked, not when the stakes were this high. Damn it, they're stalling me. Thorian felt the strain of maintaining his dark flame palm technique, his reserves of chi were dwindling perilously close to exhaustion. The ceaseless onslaught from his enemies left him little room for planning, let alone recovery. He gritted his teeth, eyes glinting like ice as he surveyed his would-be executioners. I'd hoped to avoid this, but it seems you've left me no choice. Just as he conjured the thought, a goblin champion lunged at him, brandishing a long sword imbued with malevolent energy. Thorian met the blade with the back of his flame-enshrouded hand, effortlessly turning it aside. But this time he held his position, eschewing the calculated retreats that had marked his earlier defense. Combustion touch. The transformation was instant and astonishing. Within the deep purple of Thorian's flame, a piercing red light erupted, melding with the original hue to create a chaotic swirl of crimson and violet. With the lethal grace of a predator, Thorian lunged at the green-skinned champion who had dared to attack him. His palm, now a turbulent confluence of red and purple fire, struck true, targeting the vulnerable solar plexus of his foe. Flames engulfed the champion's muscular frame as he was hurled backward, his anguished howl slicing through the air. That cry of agony seized the attention of the remaining champions, diverting their focus for one fatal moment. In the deadly dance that was this battle, even such a brief distraction was inexcusable. Seizing the opportunity, Thorian lunged at the nearest opponent, a spear-wielding hobgoblin. With a single, devastating blow, he shattered the spear's shaft while his fiery aura incinerated the splinters. Before the stunned goblin could even react, Thorian delivered a brutal kick to his stomach, rendering him defenseless. As his foe hurtled toward the ground, Thorian deactivated his dark flame palm, allowing his hand to revert to its natural state. In the same fluid motion, he snapped his fingers to reactivate Thunderclap. The hobgoblin champions, having experienced this skill twice already, were not as affected as before. They simply took a step back, gritting their teeth through the spine-chilling sound. However, that momentary lapse was all Thorian had wished for. With an incantation as quick as thought, Thorian summoned his next spell, the Mist Veil. Once again, a white fog billowed forth, enveloping the battleground in an occlusive, burning haze. Visibility plummeted, the goblin champions could hardly see their hands in front of their faces, and each breath they took was tinged with pain from the fog's caustic effects. Convinced their prey was still before them, the goblins lunged with weapons extended, hoping to bring Thorian down in one fell swoop. But they met only the insubstantial mist where he had stood. The moment the mist veil was in place, Thorian had melted into the fog, exploiting its cover to reposition himself. Emerging from the murk, he invoked another spell, this one a battle-worn favorite. A sphere of flame materialized above his palm, swirling and expanding until he hurled it with deadly accuracy at a sword-wielding champion. No sooner had the fireball found its mark than Thorian flicked his fingers upward, triggering yet another incantation. Beneath the stricken goblin, an intricate magical circle materialized, its radiant light almost too bright to bear. The goblin had no time to react. A pillar of fire erupted from the magical circle, roaring skyward in a blazing fury. The champion was consumed in a turbulent inferno, his screams drowning in the roar of the flames. A nearby compatriot, standing too close to the spectacle, was caught off guard. A wave of fire licked at his right arm, igniting it in a dance of agony. With a keening wail, the hobgoblin abandoned his spear to frantically extinguish the flames devouring his arm. His green skin was a pocked landscape of searing burns and blistering welts. When he finally dared to glance up, terror flooding his eyes, he found that Thorian was not even looking at him. Instead, Thorian's attention was riveted to the sword-wielding champion who had borne the brunt of his fiery assault. Swiftly conjuring a sphere of water, Thorian hurled it at the charred form of his unfortunate foe. The ball hit its mark and evaporated instantly with a hissing sound, succeeding mostly in quenching the flames. As the mist of his veil spell began to dissipate, the full horror of the champion's condition became visible. His body was grotesquely scorched, limbs and torso turned an ashy black, though his face was mercifully spared, streaked only with soot. Thorian then turned his gaze toward Elder Omn, the appointed referee of this harrowing duel. What he saw in the Elder's eyes was a complex cocktail of emotions, a visceral horror mingled with a sort of schadenfreude-tinged fascination. "End this farce and declare my victory," Thorian commanded, his voice pitched to carry. "There's still time to save your men." Elder Omn seemed momentarily stunned, his words stumbling over themselves before he barked out a proclamation in his own tongue. While Thorian couldn't comprehend his language, the message was unmistakable. A murmur rustled through the crowd of goblin spectators, their faces a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions, bewilderment, trepidation, and a palpable tension as they wondered what would come next. The mostly unscathed champions, including the one Thorian had dispatched earlier with a kick, huddled together. Their expressions held no anticipation, only a fog of confusion and the visceral imprint of fear, branded by Thorian's demonstration of power. The two other elders accompanying Omn were visibly discomfited. Their eyes averted from Thorian's gaze, their movements nervous and twitchy. Engaging in subdued conversation amongst themselves, they were a stark contrast to the arrogance they'd displayed earlier during negotiations with Bricks. With an impatient click of his tongue, Thorian interrupted their hushed conference. "Discussion can wait. Tend to your men now, I can't say for certain how deeply my flames have damaged them." Jolted into action by Thorian's brusque admonition, the trio of elders hastened to attend to their grievously wounded champions. The caustic purple flames from Thorian's earlier spells still clung to their skin like ravenous parasites, devouring flesh in an unrelenting assault. Thankfully, the elders managed to neutralize the magical fire before initiating their own healing incantations. As the shamanistic rituals unfurled, Bricks darted to Thorian's side, his eyes alight with a blend of awe and contrition. "I'm sorry, Master, for having doubting you. You are truly the strongest. I can't believe you have beaten all 6 of the great champions at once." Thorian offered a dismissive shrug. "What's there to celebrate in besting a handful of amateurs?" His gaze wandered past the immediate scene to the goblins assembled beyond the ring of trees. "We'll need a significant amount of wood units to accommodate so many new residents." "Don't worry about that, Master," Bricks shook his head, a note of earnestness coloring his tone. "We're used to sleeping in bushes and small caves. Just being inside the walls of the village is a considerable upgrade to our normal living standards." Thorian nodded, his clawed fingers idly scratching at his furred chin. "After we clear the wooded area between the 2 walls, it would serve as an excellent residential zone for the civilians and lower-ranking officers. Construction can commence tomorrow. The guards on the 2nd wall would also appreciate their houses being near," Bricks chimed in, eager to contribute. "It would allow them to make their shift in a much more timely manner." Thorian nodded again, silently acknowledging the validity of Bricks's point. He'd already implemented such conveniences for the inner wall guards, but had overlooked doing the same for those manning the outer defenses. With a significant influx of new civilians, it made perfect sense to extend this courtesy to the 2nd wall's sentinels as well. "Master, I am truly impressed." Bricks started, his voice somewhat shaky with excitement but his eyes bright. "It's only been a couple of days and the village has grown so much. I can't even begin to imagine how it would look in a few months or even a few years." For a moment, Thorian looked genuinely surprised at Bricks's ebullience, then a wry chuckle escaped him. "Well, you'll just have to stick around to find out." After the shaman elders tended to the wounded hobgoblin champions, Thorian approached the venerable Elder Omn. "I trust you won't renege on your word now that your warriors are healed?" Elder Omn, with golden eyes that shimmered like ancient coins, met Thorian's gaze. "Never," he replied firmly. "Your leadership is evident, King of the Kobolds. To align with you is to elevate our tribes." Thorian's laughter was rich and genuine. How refreshing it is to negotiate with one so astute. His attention drifted to the goblins filtering into the clearing. Their eyes darted anxiously, the weight of uncertainty evident in their every move. They need reassurance, Thorian advised OMN. I've shown discipline, now it's time for reward. Speak to them of hope, of the future we'll build side by side. With me, aspirants will find glory, fortune seekers will unearth treasures, and those thirsting for power will be quenched. Elder OMN's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. My intuition about you has not failed me, it seems. With a respectful inclination of his head, he added, Your wish is my command, King of the Kobolds. OMN rejoined his fellow elders, conveying Thorian's vision with conviction. The dread that Thorian had inspired still lingered like a specter among them, silencing any potential dissent. Satisfied with the unfolding dynamics, Thorian sauntered over to Brix. Have you briefed them on the state of the village? I have, Brix responded, his focus not entirely present. I told them how safe it would be to live inside. I also explained how they all can grow much stronger than they currently are with the help of the guilds and classes. Thorian glanced back toward the elders and champions, who were now rallying their respective tribes. Excellent. They'll have little difficulty in conveying the nuances to their own people. As Thorian studied the goblins, witnessing their transformation from trepidation to tentative hope, he lost himself in contemplation. When he finally turned back to Brix, he found him standing uneasily, eyes cast downward in unspoken apprehension. What troubles you? Thorian inquired, sensing the undercurrent of unease in Brix's posture. A heavy silence stretched between them before Brix found the words. I'm sorry, Master, I have disappointed you. Caught off guard, Thorian's eyebrows lifted. Disappointed? Elaborate. You gave me this important task of negotiation, yet I failed you, Brix confessed. In the end, you had to fight all the champions to cover for my incompetence, Master. Incompetence, you say? Thorian shifted his gaze upwards, staring at the beautiful night sky. Your physical weakness could be considered an incompetence indeed. Thorian's words seemed to weigh on Brix like a stone, pulling his gaze further downward, as if he could disappear into the earth. But you misunderstand, Thorian continued, softening his tone. I don't keep you in my confidence for your magical prowess or physical might. Your true strength lies in the cunning that let you survive our initial encounter, and in the adaptability that's allowed you to thrive among monsters unfamiliar to you. As Thorian spoke, he watched Brix's countenance gradually brighten. Yet despite the words of praise, an unmistakable emptiness still lingered in the shaman apprentice's eyes. Recognizing this, Thorian sank gracefully onto the ground and gestured for Brix to join him. In matters of governance and diplomacy, the scales balanced precariously between fear and hope. Thorian began, eyes narrowed as if peering into the very soul of leadership. Fear stems from power, from the willingness to wield it ruthlessly, sometimes even cruelly. Words are potent only when backed by the clenched fist that can enforce them. Thorian chuckled, and Brix's laughter softly echoed his own. Yet power alone is insufficient. One must also offer hope. Your subjects, your allies, must believe that their lot will improve through their association with you. They must be convinced that tomorrow promises more than today. As Thorian shared these insights, his thoughts meandered through the labyrinth of memory, coming to rest on the visage of his great-uncle Aldrich. The figure filled his mind, a stark silhouette against a canvas of contemplative white. Did I not give them enough hope? Thorian mused before gritting his teeth. No, it was not an issue of hope. It was one of fear. He feared the royal family more than he feared me. Master? Brix's voice punctured his introspection. Is something amiss? Shaking his head, Thorian expelled a long-held breath. Merely revisiting some unpleasant memories, he said. Refocusing his gaze on Brix, he resumed his earlier train of thought. Now, as for your role today, you did not fail me. Consider it a collaboration. I embodied fear, the unyielding force they couldn't hope to overcome. You, on the other hand, represented hope. Your eloquence spoke of brighter tomorrows, free from the claustrophobic darkness of these caves and the slow attrition of their ranks. You showed them that under my rule, they could aspire to heights previously unimagined. This is what builds loyalty. I believe I grasp your meaning, Master, Brix said, offering a respectful bow. I'm deeply grateful for your guidance. As the moon climbed higher in the Sherwood Forest sky, Thorian stood back, allowing the goblins time to digest the seismic shift their lives were about to undergo. This large clearing, so long their sanctuary, would soon be left behind for an unfamiliar landscape peopled by unfamiliar beings. It was no surprise that hesitation pulsed like an undercurrent through the gathered tribes. Yet, in the strictly hierarchical goblin society, the words of the elders and champions carried the weight of divine mandate. Once their leaders had decreed the course, debate was effectively silenced. Roughly an hour passed, filled with strategic regrouping, the return of scouting parties, and the muted chaos of families collecting their sparse belongings. Then, as if guided by some unseen hand, the three tribes fell into formation and began their exodus toward Wolvendale village. The journey back to Wolvendale was an arduous one, a trek far lengthier than Thorian or the goblin champions would have required on their own. Their pace was dictated by the slowest among them, the aged, the infirm, the young. Yet the real trial lay in the fact that their sizable caravan did not go unnoticed. The forest teemed with threats, chaskas, thrycreen warriors, and even rival goblins, all converging on them with malicious intent. Initially, the goblin champions displayed a cavalier attitude toward these attacks. So long as their own safety wasn't compromised, the loss of a few lesser goblins seemed inconsequential to them. Thorian quickly disabused them of that notion. "Your authority comes from your responsibility," he snapped, his voice a biting wind amid the forest's ambient rustle. "If you expect your subordinates to heed your commands and respect your rank, then you must shield them from the perils that beset this journey. Leadership is not a one-sided affair, it's a contract, a sacred exchange." Upon the conclusion of Thorian's admonition, Brix swiftly translated his words into their native tongue for the goblin champions. Two of them wore predictably disgruntled expressions, but the other four responded with nods of contemplative agreement. Though the two dissenters muttered under their breath in phrases unintelligible to Thorian, they raised no overt objections. The shaman elders received much the same directive. Thorian ordered them to extend their healing arts to all wounded goblins, not just the champions they so obviously favored. While there was a ripple of discontent among them, it was muted by the realization that the balance of power had undeniably shifted. They grasped that they had to prove their worth and competence to Thorian, lest they be supplanted by younger, more adaptive shamans. They had witnessed Brix's rapid evolution, and they understood that within weeks, a new generation of shaman apprentices could rise to eclipse them. After a journey teeming with peril and punctuated by skirmishes, the caravan emerged from the forest's embrace 2 hours later. Before them stood the outer wall of Wolvendale village, the ground at its base strewn with the carcasses of fallen monsters, a gruesome tableau that bore silent witness to the settlement's own struggles. The guards on the ramparts and in the watchtowers looked down in astonished bewilderment. Direwolves patrolled the perimeter of the wall, their keen senses alert to any signs of movement among the fallen bodies. They were tasked with ensuring that none played dead amongst the corpses. But when the army of goblins emerged from the dense forest, the direwolves shifted their attention, their eyes locking onto the new arrivals. Caught in a haze of confusion and curiosity, one goblin strayed from his formation to get a closer look. No sooner had he taken a few steps forward than a direwolf lunged at him, its fangs bared, ready to finish him off. "Halt!" Thorian commanded, stepping forward and raising a restraining hand. The direwolf stopped in its tracks, growling softly as Thorian caressed its neck. "These are our new allies, there is no need for hostility." The goblin who had nearly met his end fell onto his back, letting out a shrill cry. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared up at the massive wolf, his eyes brimming with terror. "Return to your formation," Thorian gestured to the goblin, who promptly complied, whether he understood the words or merely the gesture was immaterial. Once the goblin had rejoined his comrades, Thorian scratched the direwolf behind its ears and nudged it back towards its pack near the wall. He then signaled for Brix to approach him as they made their way toward the village entrance. "Open the gates," Thorian announced, his voice carrying authority as he strode forward with Brix at his side. "I have returned, and I bring new allies with us." As Thorian approached the gate, the wooden doors creaked open, revealing Forlun and his band of warriors, their faces alight with smiles. "As expected, my king," Forlun said, his laughter rich and hearty. "You disappear for a few hours and you come back with a full army by your side." "It's been a long journey to this moment," Thorian acknowledged, his eyes meeting Brix's. He turned back to Forlun and issued his orders. "Escort our new allies to the village hall along with Brix. Tonight, the focus is on establishing them as citizens and securing them shelter. We'll convene tomorrow to discuss their integration into various units." "Understood, my king," Forlun responded, though a look of puzzlement crossed his face. "But how do I talk with them? They don't seem to understand our language, and I definitely don't understand theirs." "Brix will assist you," Thorian assured him, then directed his gaze toward the young shaman apprentice. "In addition to aiding Forlun with logistics, I have another task for you. I want a comprehensive account of the goblin tribe, everything from their total numbers to the specifics of their hierarchy, including how many hobgoblins there are and under which champion or elder they serve. Compile this information and present it to Melina. Do you understand? Understood, Master, Brix replied, nodding with palpable enthusiasm. I'll carry out your instructions to the letter. What about the classes, King? Forlun inquired. Should I tour them around the guilds to get their classes? Not today, Thorian answered, shaking his head decisively. We'll address that tomorrow. For tonight, just provide them with shelter and keep a watchful eye. The guarding duty should be lighter since the portals will cease to appear shortly. Forlun glanced skyward, his smile tinged with complexity. Oh, this will be the end of the second day, he mused. It's been a long 2 days. But now we're finally going to receive those rewards we have been promised for so long. First thing tomorrow, we'll convene a meeting to assess the village's progress and outline our agenda for the day, Thorian said, more to himself than anyone else. Then, locking eyes with Forlun, he concluded, that's all for now? Stay vigilant and report back to me immediately should anything go awry. I will do that, Forlun acknowledged with a nod, signaling the end of their conversation. He, along with Brix and a detachment of warriors, took on the duty of escorting the goblin newcomers, while Thorian commenced his patrol along the outer wall's perimeter. As he walked, Thorian remained vigilant for any structural weaknesses or suspicious areas in the fortifications. To his relief, he found none. At each gate he passed, he paused to reflect on the events of the past few hours. Nothing adverse had occurred, which not only relieved him but also signified the increasing strength of his village. A particularly noteworthy development was the complete evolution of the last few brown kobolds into their advanced kobold forms. Though he had anticipated this milestone within a few days, they had achieved it in nearly half the time. At present, the kobolds serving as combatants in Thorian's forces were roughly on par with the goblin champions, albeit slightly less powerful. However, once these kobolds underwent their first-class advancement, they would likely outmatch the champions in their current state. Good, Thorian thought, a wisp of a smile crossing his lips. This should serve as a clear message to any would-be challengers among the champions. While the goblins had agreed to submit to Thorian as part of their arrangement, he understood the intricacies of the mind all too well. Even if they feared his power and appreciated Brix's diplomatic skills, there was still the potential for discord if they perceived the kobolds under Thorian's rule as weak. Such perceptions could sow the seeds of rebellious thoughts, which might eventually germinate into plans and actions. But this should make it clear. Even my least capable fighters can match their most formidable warriors. With this satisfying thought in mind, Thorian set about erecting guardhouses near each of the 4 outer gates. These structures were intended exclusively for the guards tasked with vigilant, round-the-clock shifts, providing security against external threats. Just as Thorian placed the finishing touches on the final guardhouse, a notification materialized before him. Monster quest fully completed. Now serving rewards. Level up. Level up. Level up. Skill acquired. Predator's Gaze. Predator's Gaze. Description: sharpen your focus and momentarily heighten your vision, allowing you to see heat signatures through obstacles. Rewards for Milestone 4 will be shown in the next evolution. Just as Thorian's lips parted into a smile as he saw the rewards pouring in, another set of notifications appeared in front of him. Revenge on the monsters fully completed. Now serving rewards. Level up. Level up. Level up. Error: all class starting skills already acquired and fully mastered. Generating new reward. Skill acquired: Elemental Perception. Description: supercharge your eyes temporarily with mana, allowing you to identify different elements in your environment. Purple Cloud weapon acquired: Ember Strike Cane. As the notification disappeared, a long staff was being materialized right at Thorian's grasp. It took a few seconds before it finally materialized and Thorian could grasp it. Ember Strike Cane. Rarity. Class requirement: Magus. Advancement requirement: First Advancement. Level requirement: 20. Description: the Ember Strike Cane is made from phoenix wood, rendering it nearly fireproof. Its tip holds a pulsing red orb that enhances the wielder's fire magic. Stat bonuses: mana plus 25, strength plus 10. Abilities: increases the potency of fire-based spells by 20%. Special abilities: Flare Burst. Once a day, you can channel the staff to unleash a flare that deals moderate fire damage to all enemies in a 10-meter radius. As Thorian gripped the staff, he felt a surge of fiery energy course through him. The sensation was as if merely holding this weapon endowed him with remarkable strength. His gaze was quickly drawn to the deep red orb mounted at the staff's apex. Its luminescence seemed almost hypnotic. The orb's purity is high. It can be extracted and repurposed long after this weapon has outlived its usefulness. Cradled within the metallic jaws of a lizard-shaped head, the fist-sized orb seemed a perfect fit. The silver metal seamlessly blended with the staff's wooden core, and arcane symbols etched along its length flickered with intermittent crimson light. At last, a weapon befitting my abilities. All I need now is a robe attuned to fire or wind, and I'll be well equipped for the challenges ahead. Content with his newfound rewards, Thorian turned his attention to his status panel. Eager to see the tangible results of his recent endeavors, he looked forward to witnessing the fruits of his labor crystallized before his eyes. Display panel. Ding. Race Flame Kobold. Level 23/30th EXP, 3782/6800. Class Elemental Magus. Level 20/40th EXP, 172/6600. Lifespan 40 years. Cultivation Realm Chi Gathering 4th Stage, 3.5%. Stats. Strength 103. Agility 114. Constitution 82. Manas Ratustiga. Chi 60. Free points 15. Ah, I'm 3 points short, Thorian muttered, biting his lower lip in frustration. If only I'd remembered the jack-of-all-trades skill earlier, I would have allocated my points differently. Though he regretted his oversight, Thorian shook off the disappointment. There was no use crying over spilled milk. It's only the second day, there's no need to fret, he reassured himself. Last time around, it took me a year and a half to even discover this skill and accumulate enough free points for it. By then, I was already a high-level, second advancement fire magus. Reflecting on his past experiences brought a smile to his face. He could focus on acquiring the jack-of-all-trades skill tomorrow. Staff in hand, Thorian made his way toward the village hall. The closer he got, the more people he encountered, primarily goblins, who thronged the area around the hall in great numbers. Kobolds and Kobloid citizens observed the new arrivals with keen interest. Navigating through the crowd of goblins, Thorian finally reached his destination. Brix and Elder OMN were deep in conversation just outside the village hall. Clearing his throat lightly to announce his arrival, Thorian approached the elder. So, what's your impression of the village, Elder OMN? Elder OMN turned around, his face breaking into a broad smile. It is marvelous, King of the Kobolds. Just call me King, Thorian interjected. Very well. King, OMN nodded, adjusting his terminology. I had initially thought Brix's descriptions to be exaggerated, but it seems he was rather modest in his praise. I'm pleased it meets your approval, Thorian replied, taking a moment to inhale deeply before laying out the immediate plans. For tonight, all goblins, be they regular, hobgoblins, champions, or even elders, will be quartered in the area between the two walls. Is that clear? Elder OMN hesitated momentarily, evidently surprised, before comprehension dawned on him. As you wish, King. I will relay this information to the rest of our council. Good, Thorian nodded, continuing his briefing. We'll meet early tomorrow to discuss the formation of new units. Each will be comprised of a mix of races, goblins, kobolds, and even some orcs. The aim is to foster unity and camaraderie as swiftly as possible. I trust you understand the logic behind this approach. As agreed in our negotiations, each elder will head one of these units. I am profoundly grateful for your generosity, Elder OMN responded, bowing slightly. His expression then turned hesitant. If I may, could I inquire about these much-discussed classes? Will we have an opportunity to explore them? Those details will be addressed in the morning, Thorian replied. For now, rest well. Tomorrow promises to be a long and productive day, you'll need all your energy for it. With that, Thorian bid farewell to the two goblins and entered the hall. The first person he noticed was Forlun, his towering presence unmistakable as he organized the goblins into orderly lines that ended at Melina's desk. Clutched in his hand was a silvery saber that Thorian had never seen before. Is that a new weapon you've acquired? Thorian approached, smiling. It suits you well. Caught off guard initially, Forlun broke into laughter when he saw Thorian approach. It's called the Moonlight Saber, he announced, brandishing the weapon proudly. What a beautiful piece of work. It's even better than this chest plate. His eyes then drifted to Thorian's staff. And what about yours, King? It appears quite imposing. It's called the Ember Strike Cane, Thorian responded, examining his weapon. It significantly enhances the potency of my fire magic. I fear for your enemies, King, Forlun roared with laughter. You were already incinerating them, now there might not even be charred bones left behind. You joke too much, Thorian chuckled, proceeding past Forlun. At the other end of the room, Melina was hard at work registering the stream of new goblin citizens. The line seemed endless, and for a brief moment, Thorian felt sympathy for the receptionist. Her night was clearly going to be a long one. As he moved through the hall, Thorian's eyes landed on the bulletin board. There appeared to be one more quest listed than usual. Intrigued, he plucked the quest parchment from its place to give it a closer look. The Midnight Guardians of Loxley. Description: unlock the full capabilities of Loxley by defeating the formidable guardians that appear at the stroke of midnight. For powerful boss monsters will materialize at the north, south, east, and west perimeters of the city. Vanquish these ancient foes to activate the city's long-dormant fortress system and earn substantial rewards. Quest objectives. Be at one of Loxley's cardinal points, north, south, east, west, by midnight. Defeat the boss monster at that location. Rewards. Unlock Loxley's fortress system. Contribution-based rewards, varies, arcane coins, experience points, special items. Speed bonus, extra rewards for slaying the boss monster quickly. Interesting. So even the surrounding territories to the main city have access to this type of quest. After examining the new quest, Thorian returned the parchment to its spot on the bulletin board. This development would certainly be a key topic in tomorrow's meeting. The unlocking of Loxley's fortress system marked a significant shift in regional dynamics. Coupled with the declining numbers of roaming monsters, this could offer a glimmer of hope to the survivors of the initial apocalyptic events. More importantly, it could serve as a powerful asset for humanity to regain their footing in a world now dominated by monsters. But these were considerations for tomorrow. For the moment, Thorian decided to put such matters aside. His immediate plan was simple: return to his residence and get some much-needed rest. As Thorian walked back to his home, he noticed Harold sitting in the distance. The direwolf was in the same meditative posture as before, but the absence of circulating mana indicated that he had fallen asleep, evidently worn out from intensive mana manipulation training. A smile crossed Thorian's face at the sight of his companion's dedication. Approaching Harold, he took a deep breath and carefully hoisted the massive creature over his shoulders. The direwolf remained asleep, his light growls and deep exhales gently ruffling Thorian's fur. Once inside, Thorian settled Harold into a corner of the living room before proceeding to the master bedroom. The moment he collapsed onto his bed, his mind switched off, and he was enveloped in the peace of deep sleep. Too clean, Tristan murmured, studying the decapitated head of a knight whose body lay a short distance away. The cut was precise, a straight line devoid of any jags or irregularities. This wasn't the work of goblins or those large felines. A human did this. As he spoke, his thoughts drifted back to his encounter with Nalia, the mysterious woman in green who had graced this very plaza 2 days prior. She had been nothing but a vexation since. With a solemn prayer, Tristan gently returned the fallen knight's head to its resting place in the earth. Rising to his feet, he surveyed his surroundings, the plaza now crowned by the 4 majestic statues he had coveted since his arrival. His reverie was shattered by a sudden yelp. Whirling around, he saw a woman clad in leather armor and chainmail, her hand clapped over her mouth in horror. A goblin had scrambled atop a pile of rubble and lunged at her with a dagger. Fortunately, a man in his late 20s intervened just in time, dispatching the creature with a single, fluid slash of his sword. "I told you there was no need for you to come, Jasmine," Tristan said, striding over to the woman, his sword securely sheathed at his belt. "You're exposing yourself to unnecessary risks." Still rattled by the recent encounter, Jasmine took a moment to compose herself before responding. "Call it stubbornness, Your Grace," she said with a wistful smile, casting her gaze over the crumbled buildings and ashen streets. This once beautiful city deserved at least a witness to its fate. "Not much left to witness," Tristan replied, his laugh tinged with a note of despair. He surveyed the devastation before turning back to the young merchant. "Jasmine, your efforts haven't gone unnoticed. I deeply appreciate your initiative." Hearing his words, Jasmine bowed graciously. "Thank you, Your Grace. It's an honor to assist in any way I can, especially in times like these." Tristan nodded, his eyes taking in the scene around him. He had brought 2 squadrons from the city's interior for this mission. Any more, and the inner wall protecting the remaining citizens might be left vulnerable. Glancing to his left, he noticed General Henry leading the Iron Vanguard with calculated efficiency. They were clearing the adjacent street of monstrous threats, spear and lance at the ready. Whenever they sighted a goblin or one of the mutated felines, the soldiers encircled the creature, dispatching it with coordinated thrusts. For those beasts crafty enough to take refuge in the narrow alleys or beneath rubble, the knights unsheathed their swords and delivered swift justice. Just as Tristan was about to shift his attention elsewhere, his best friend Oswald approached. "We're nearly finished on this side," Oswald gestured toward his own squadron, led by the elderly Robert. Despite his age, Robert radiated a vitality that seemed to outshine even the youngest among them, and that was without invoking any special skills. "It seems our initial assumptions were correct," Oswald mused, his expression thoughtful. "The number of monsters has significantly diminished. These streets should have been teeming with hundreds of them. We've encountered merely a couple dozen." "That's a hopeful sign," Tristan said, allowing a rare smile to cross his features. "It should ease the burden on the guards manning the inner wall. The past 2 days have been hellish." "You haven't been getting much sleep, have you?" Oswald noted, his tone tinged with disapproval. "I told you to rest. A weary commander is of little use to his troops." "You're one to talk," Tristan retorted, clicking his tongue in mock annoyance. "If I could find sleep while the world around me is ablaze, I'd question my own sanity." At Tristan's words, Oswald chuckled. For a moment, both men stood in companionable silence, watching their forces complete the task of securing the plaza. After several moments of quiet reflection, Tristan finally spoke, breaking the silence. "If the monster population is indeed decreasing, that's promising," Tristan said, pausing to consider the implications. "We might even stand a chance of reclaiming the outer city. With these magnificent statues, that hope becomes all the more tangible," Oswald replied, gesturing toward the towering figures that encircled them. "Shall we inspect them? I've been looking forward to it." Tristan followed Oswald's gaze, his eyes widening in awe at the sight of the statues. "Indeed, we've waited long enough." Without another word, they moved toward the statue that resonated with both of them, the warrior. Its imposing form emanated an aura of pride and virility, a magnet for any knight. As Tristan reached out to touch the statue, a notification materialized before him, arresting his attention. "Warrior Statue 5/200. Would you like to choose the warrior class?" "So, Robert saw this as well?" Tristan pondered, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And 5 out of 200? Does that imply there are 3 others, besides Robert and Little Roo, who have claimed this class?" His thoughts briefly stalled as he recalled a face he'd rather forget, Nalia. The reports suggested her forces numbered in the thousands. Does that mean most of them are now dead? But even so, how could nearly 2,000 people claim a class when the cap for each is set at 200? That does not make a lick of sense. The enigma before him defied easy explanation, but Tristan pushed it to the back of his mind. Such ponderings could wait, the immediate choice was what mattered. "Yes, I choose the warrior class," Tristan declared, his voice unwavering. "Choose one of these starting abilities." Abilities. Power Strike. Imbue your weapon with magical power and strike the enemy with an attack that deals additional damage. Charge allows the warrior to quickly close the distance to their target, potentially stunning or knocking them down with a small shockwave. Taunting Shout provokes enemies to focus their attacks on the warrior, protecting more vulnerable party members. Weapon Proficiency passive allows the warrior to use various types of melee weapons effectively, such as swords, axes, and maces. Shield Proficiency passive grants the ability to use shields for added defense, helping to block or deflect incoming attacks. Surveying the array of skills displayed before him, Tristan felt the allure of each one. Every skill offered unique advantages, each tailored to fulfill a distinct role within a team. After a moment of contemplation, he made his choice. "I choose Charge," he announced, his voice resolute. "Congratulations, you have become a warrior. You can check your information by simply saying or thinking display panel." As he read through the notification, Tristan muttered out loud the last 2 words, display panel. Ding. Class Warrior. Level 0/20 EXP 0/10. Lifespan 60 years. Stats. Strength 12. Agility 10. Constitution 10. Mana 5. Free points 0. Skills. Charge active. As Tristan gazed at the floating text before him, he was rendered speechless. His eyes locked onto the ethereal words, his heartbeat pounding like war drums in his chest. Not even his first encounter with the grotesque goblins could match the profound wonder he felt now. It was as if he had caught a fleeting glimpse of another world. Tristan? Hey, snap out of it. Oswald's voice pulled him back to reality. Glancing sideways, he noticed Oswald motioning for him to turn around. Their 2 squadrons had completed their tasks and now awaited further instructions. Your Grace, couldn't you have waited just a bit longer? General Henry approached, his voice rich with hearty laughter. We, too, are keen to discover the hidden wonders of these celestial statues. My apologies, Sir Henry. I suppose I was a bit overeager, Tristan said, chuckling as he scratched his head. He then turned to address his assembled knights. I know you're all eager to acquire these magical abilities, but we must proceed in an organized and deliberate manner. Each squadron will divide its members equally among the 4 statues. As for the skills you choose, I'll leave that to your personal discretion. With those directives, the knights huddled together to discuss the allocation of classes. The most robust and seasoned among them were granted the right to choose the warrior class, while the others distributed themselves among the remaining 3. While his knights deliberated, Tristan walked over to Jasmine, who led the merchant association. You and your mercenaries are also free to select classes, he announced warmly. How you distribute them is your choice. Caught off guard by this unexpected honor, Jasmine promptly bowed. Thank you, Your Grace. Your generosity won't be forgotten. Wasting no time, as if fearful Tristan might rescind his offer, Jasmine hastily conferred with her mercenaries. She then approached the statues, scrutinizing each one carefully. After gathering all the information she could, she chose the Magus class for herself. Most of her mercenaries became assassins, with a few selecting the warrior class, 2 opting for Magus, and 1 for priest. This distribution makes sense. A mercenary's job isn't typically on the front lines, Tristan thought, nodding to himself before rejoining his friend. We've finally acquired the abilities that Sir Robert has, Oswald mused. Watching him single-handedly vanquish hordes of goblins and other monstrosities was beyond anything I could have imagined. Tristan nodded, taking in his friend's observation. Indeed. It's almost miraculous how these magical abilities have rejuvenated a man in the twilight of his life. Tristan's voice trailed off, his gaze shifting toward the inner city. His expression was a tapestry of mixed emotions. You're thinking about your younger brother, aren't you? Oswald surmised. Tristan nodded slowly. If magical powers can imbue a man of advanced age with such vitality, then perhaps they could help James overcome his frailty. It's a prospect worth considering for the young prince, Oswald agreed. But first, we'll need to secure safe passage from the inner city to this location. If the monsters continue their relative inactivity, we might be able to stabilize the area in a matter of days. That would indeed be ideal, Tristan said, letting out a subdued sigh before smiling. As their conversation wound down, Tristan's eyes roamed the plaza. Eventually, they settled on a grand stone building situated at the far end, beyond the towering statues. Adorned with intricate decorations, its entrance was imposing. Initially, Tristan had paid it little mind, as the statues were of paramount importance. But now, having completed the task of class selection, his curiosity was piqued by this enigmatic structure. Should we venture inside? Oswald suggested, catching Tristan's focused gaze on the mysterious building. We're already here. We may as well discover what's left to be discovered. You read my mind, Tristan replied with a chuckle. The 2 friends promptly entered the imposing structure. Inside, they found a single, unadorned room in stark contrast to the elaborate exterior. A large bulletin board covered one wall, adorned with a myriad of parchments. At the far end of the room sat an elderly man with a white beard, who glanced up at the newcomers before returning to his reading with a dismissive scoff. Undeterred by the man's aloof demeanor, Tristan approached him. Excuse me, sir, may I ask you some questions? What is the nature of this place? You ask for permission to ask questions but proceed without waiting for an answer? The old man scoffed again. No matter. This is simply a hall without a master to claim it. Although momentarily taken aback by the man's curt response, Tristan was intrigued by his subsequent words. A hall without an owner? Is it possible to claim it? The elderly man took a moment to appraise Tristan before responding. Yes, but not at present. Puzzled by the man's terse answer, Tristan exchanged a quick shrug with Oswald. Intrigued by the large bulletin board, Oswald turned his attention back to the old man. Sir, could you enlighten us about the purpose of that board? Quests you can undertake are posted there, the man replied, not lifting his eyes from the document he was perusing. Though still succinct, the old man's answer offered a new avenue for exploration. The two friends approached the board and each selected a parchment to examine. Slay 10 monsters. Description: eliminate 10 of the wandering monsters in the area to receive rewards for your efforts. Quest objectives: eliminate 10 monsters. Rewards: 100 arcane coins. 100 experience points. As Tristan examined the quest details, he quickly grasped the basic concept. However, one aspect still eluded him. Turning back to the old man, he inquired, Sir, could you elaborate on these arcane coins? What purpose do they serve? The old man's voice tinged with exasperation. He explained, they're coins, you use them to purchase things. Skills, food, and even goods from others. Buy whatever you need. Skills? And food? Tristan's eyebrow arched in surprise. How can we buy food with these coins? Setting aside his paper, the old man sighed deeply and regarded Tristan with evident annoyance. You buy food at the shop. But you can't right now, the fortress is still locked. Instead of clarifying things, the old man's explanations only generated more questions in Tristan's mind. So, how do we go about unlocking this fortress? Without uttering a word, the old man gestured toward a particular quest posted on the bulletin board. As Tristan stepped closer to read the parchment, his heartbeat quickened in palpable anticipation. Since the moment he had stepped foot inside this stone building, he had realized he was on the cusp of a transformative era, yet he wasn't merely a passive observer. He was shaping history with his own hands. While Tristan meticulously read through the quest details, absorbed in every word, his friend Oswald's voice pulled him from his thoughts. How do we accept these quests? Oswald inquired, turning to the old man. I don't see a place to sign. Bring it here, the old man replied curtly. Oswald complied. Meanwhile, Tristan continued to study the quest in his hand. For guardians coming from all directions? Just how powerful could these creatures be? We need to prepare for battle immediately, he thought. Lost in contemplation, Tristan mechanically went through the process of accepting the quests, starting with the perilous 4-Guardian mission before moving on to the daily tasks. As he completed the paperwork, Oswald nudged him back to reality. Something's happening outside. Exiting the building, they were met with an unexpected sight. A new faction had arrived. A squadron of 20 knights stood at attention, commanded by a lord in his mid-50s and a younger, unremarkable man who rode slightly behind him. The lord, sporting a sharp beard, was clad in full-plated armor and carried a lance at his side. His younger companion, in contrast, wore a simple light brown, long-sleeved shirt and was clean-shaven, his features hardly noteworthy. Tristan's brow lifted at the newcomers, but it was Oswald's expression that held the most surprise. Father, he whispered. Oswald, the older lord, dismounted hastily, his eyes searching his son's face with palpable concern. You had me deeply worried. Turning to Tristan, he bowed with a hint of formality. Your Grace, I am heartened to see you well. Hearing of your journey alongside my son through the monstrous hordes in this besieged city, I could not stay away. General Henry gave a sarcastic cough, not bothering to hide his skepticism. It was obvious that, had Lord Johannes truly felt this way, he wouldn't have remained ensconced in his manor for the past 2 days. However, Tristan, bound by decorum and respect for his friend's family, chose to respond with veiled civility. Lord Johannes, your timely presence is most welcome. As the adage goes, a stitch in time saves 9, and yet here we are. He allowed a brief pause, letting the weight of his words hang thickly in the air before lightening the mood. Nonetheless, I appreciate your journey here. Unity is indeed our most potent asset during these testing times, wouldn't you agree? Caught off guard, Johannes took a moment to recover before answering with a newfound vigor. Of course, Your Grace. It is in these defining moments that we must step forward. I'm glad you share my thoughts. Tristan approached the head of the Strongheart family, intent on emphasizing the contributions of the others. General Henry has dedicated many years to our city's service. Even now, he leads his Iron Vanguard, rescuing our citizens and defending our inner walls. General Henry chuckled warmly. These old bones may ache, but they've never ignored the call of duty. It's heartening to see you so well, General, Lord Johannes said. A lion may age, but his fangs remain as sharp as ever. Your kind words honor me, Lord Johannes, the general replied, bowing slightly with well-practiced grace. And let's not forget Oswald, Tristan interjected, who has been indefatigable in his efforts. He is, without a doubt, the pride of the Strongheart family. Johannes' expression grew complex as he looked at his son. After a moment's contemplation, he bowed his head lightly. Your praise is most generous, your grace. There's no need for such formality among friends, Tristan said, extending a warm handshake toward Johannes. I've admired you since my youth, Lord Strongheart. You have honored both your family and this city throughout your life. Taken aback by the flood of compliments, Johannes could only muster a simple, thank you. Not to let the praise go unshared, Tristan chuckled, steering Johannes' attention to a woman clad in leather armor. May I introduce Jasmine, the head of the Merchant Alliance? Her contributions have been invaluable, providing both our army and the civilian populace with much-needed food and clothing, purely out of the kindness of her heart. Johannes' eyebrows lifted with keen interest. Remarkable. To lead the Merchant Alliance at such a young age and still extend such generosity. I am genuinely impressed. He turned back to Tristan, adding, to see a young prince surrounded by such remarkable individuals harkens back to the days when we stood beside your father against the western barbarians. My father often regaled me with tales of those times, Tristan smiled, directing the conversation back to Jasmine. In the past 2 days, it's become abundantly clear that without Lady Jasmine, the city walls might have crumbled and Loxley would have been lost. An army, after all, marches on its stomach. Pausing to let his words sink in, Tristan looked earnestly at Lord Johannes. In light of her heroic efforts and commitment to our cause, I intend to use my authority as the first prince to recommend Jasmine for a seat on the council. Would you stand with me in this, Lord Johannes? Caught off guard by the proposal, Johannes hesitated. Sensing the eyes of everyone upon him, he let out a deep sigh before nodding his agreement. If it is your wish, your grace, then I will certainly support you. I knew I could count on you, Tristan declared, shaking Johannes' hand vigorously as he laughed. It's the least I can do, Johannes returned the smile. His gaze then swept across the enormous statues surrounding them. Your grace, rumors of these divine statues have reached even me. When might you acquaint us with their wonders? Following Johannes' gaze, Tristan chuckled. Why not right now? These are divine constructs, gifts from the gods themselves. While we may need to establish some regulations, these blessings should not be hoarded by a single individual. Your wisdom continues to humble me, your grace, Johannes said, smiling graciously. Shall we proceed then? Certainly, Tristan gestured, allowing Lord Johannes and his men to approach the statues and choose their classes. After brief deliberations among themselves, they dispersed, each selecting one of the 4 imposing statues. I apologize for my father's behavior, Oswald approached Tristan hesitantly. It's disheartening to see him only step forward when it's convenient for him. There's no need to apologize, Tristan exhaled, releasing a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Besides, I managed to secure his support for Jasmine's council seat, so it wasn't a total loss. I'm impressed, Oswald laughed. I never thought you had such diplomatic finesse. It comes with the territory of being the first prince, Tristan replied, sharing in the laughter. As the minutes ticked by, Lord Johannes' men busied themselves selecting their classes from the towering statues. But Tristan's attention shifted to the slender man who had accompanied Lord Johannes earlier. Unlike the others, he seemed in no hurry to make a choice, lingering on the sidelines. Why does he seem familiar? Tristan pondered. I can't quite place where I've seen him before. Despite his focused contemplation, Tristan couldn't pinpoint where he'd previously encountered the mysterious man. Soon enough, Lord Johannes completed his activities in the plaza and headed back into the city. Even as the squadron rode off, Tristan found his gaze lingering on the slender figure, an inexplicable sense of unease gnawing at him. The first sensation that roused Thorian from sleep wasn't the soft rays of dawn but rather a deep, insistent rumbling from his stomach. His immediate awareness was one of hunger. Since enjoying the piece of meat that Brix had roasted for him, he had gone without food. Even for a man of his considerable discipline, operating on an empty stomach was a growing challenge. I need to have Brix roast some thumpelopes soon. Our cooking logistics also require immediate attention, he mused. Yet, pressing matters awaited him, ones that took precedence over immediate gratification. Slipping out of bed, Thorian donned his verdant robe and took up his emberstrike cane. Exiting his bedroom, he noticed Harold still ensconced in peaceful slumber in the living room. Choosing not to disturb his newfound companion, Thorian decided to let him rest a while longer. As he stepped out of his second-tier residence, the sky was just beginning to show the faintest light, a gentle crack in the dark tapestry of the night. To his surprise, a few industrious kobolds and kobolds were already making their way toward the forge and the lab. It heartened him to see that even at this early hour, there were those with the drive and self-discipline to commence their day's work. You all have promising futures ahead, Thorian thought, silently observing the early risers. Maintain this level of discipline and you're bound to make names for yourselves. Best of luck! As much as part of him wanted to linger and watch the industrious few, Thorian knew he couldn't afford such indulgence. His own responsibilities beckoned, and they would brook no delay. With that thought, he made his way to the village hall. There, he found Melina seated at her desk, gently sipping her morning tea. "Good morning, Melina," Thorian announced, making his presence known. "I trust my projects haven't worn you out?" Upon hearing his voice, Melina set her tea down and began to respond. "Good morning to you, my lo." She was interrupted by a sleepy yawn and her face flushed with mild embarrassment. "I apologize," Thorian said, walking toward the elven clerk with a regretful expression. "Last night was an anomaly. You shouldn't have had to register so many new citizens at such a late hour." Melina shook her head, regaining her composure. "No need to apologize, my lord. The early stages of any territory are bound to be hectic. Truth be told, working under your leadership has mostly been a smooth experience." Thorian chuckled, pleased. "I'm glad to hear you feel that way." No sooner had the words left his mouth than his stomach gave a loud, betraying rumble. His red-furred cheeks deepened a shade as he looked down, momentarily chagrined. "Feeling hungry, my lord?" Melina asked, a light laugh in her voice. She gestured toward a nearby table. "Please have a seat. Would you care for some tea and toast?" The offer was simple, but in that moment it felt like the most gracious invitation Thorian could have received. "Thank you, Lady Melina," Thorian said, offering a courteous bow. "That sounds delightful." Taking a seat at one of the tables scattered throughout the hall, he watched as Melina disappeared into a back room. She returned moments later bearing a tray laden with tea and toasted bread. For Thorian, who had subsisted on far less since his reincarnation, it was a veritable feast. Savoring the first sip of honey-infused tea, he turned to Melina, who had taken a seat beside him. "Now shall we delve into the report?" "Certainly, my lord," Melina nodded, immediately launching into her briefing. Firstly, according to the unit leader's reports, all of the newly evolved Kobloid fighters have completed their transitions. The Magi have transformed into the elemental kobolds you're familiar with. Regarding the warriors, there are two primary evolutionary branches, Stoneshell and Ironclaw kobolds. The Stoneshells possess enhanced defensive capabilities, shown by rocky armor covering their upper bodies. The Ironclaws, on the other hand, are more agile, built for explosive movements. "Intriguing," Thorian replied, his mind recalling the appearances of Lapis and Vivax's units. "And what of the priests and the assassins?" His interest piqued, Thorian took another bite of the toast, finding that even the most mundane matters seemed more palatable when his stomach wasn't dominating his thoughts. "The priests have evolved into Earthwarden kobolds, distinguished by their slight frames and intricate tattoos," Melina began. "As for the assassins, their numbers are limited, but those that exist have become Duskblade kobolds. I believe we have 6 at present." Thorian set his teacup down thoughtfully. "Our assassins are indeed few. I'll need to prioritize that class with the upcoming batch of goblins. It's only a matter of time before we require robust assassin units for reconnaissance and intelligence operations." He took another bite of his toast and, after swallowing, prompted Melina to proceed. "And their class progression? I presume most haven't maxed out?" "Actually, a few have," Melina replied. "From Lapis and Vivax's units, 10 have advanced. Among them, 5 are Magi, each specializing in earth magic." Thorian rubbed his chin contemplatively. While diversifying might have provided broader skills, specialization has its merits. It could potentially ease their advancement through the 2nd, 3rd, and even 4th tiers, allowing them to attain the rank of Archmagi. He motioned for Melina to continue. "And the remaining 5? "They are warriors," Melina explained. 3 have ascended to the rank of Squire, while the other 2 have become Guardians." Nodding, Thorian remarked, "Guardians are invaluable on the battlefield. As for the Squires, not so much. I'd prefer to steer the initiate warriors towards weapon specializations. Whether as swordsman or spearman, honing in on a specific weapon class offers more strategic value than becoming generic Squires." Continuing her briefing, Melina described the levels of Lapis and Vivax's units, which averaged around level 9 for their species. The newer kobolds were at an average of level 2, a significant progress that Thorian couldn't help but feel proud of. Switching her focus, Melina then detailed the structure of the goblin tribes as relayed to her by Bricks. There were 3 main tribes, each led by an elder, Elder Omn with 170 members, Elder Jarv with 159, and Elder Yer overseeing 127. Each elder was served by 2 goblin champions. Melina went on to say that the goblin population was divided into 3/4 combatants and 1/4 civilians, which included women, children, and the elderly. Among the combatants, units were generally structured with simple goblins numbering 7 to 12 per group. Elite units, on the other hand, were led by a hobgoblin and usually consisted of 5 to 8 members. Each tribe had between 5 and 7 elite units, totaling 18 hobgoblin chieftains across all tribes. The remaining units were of the standard variety. By the time Melina concluded her report, Thorian was grinning with satisfaction, his mood further buoyed by the nourishing meal she had provided. "Thank you for your diligence, Melina. And special thanks for this delightful meal." "You're most welcome, my lord," Melina replied, bowing gracefully. "Should you desire, I can arrange meals for you whenever you wish. The gods have been generous, providing me daily with more than enough to feed 2. Taking a moment to consider, Thorian finally acquiesced. "I find it a bit humbling, but I must accept your generous offer." He paused before adding, "Also, you should get some rest. There are still a few hours before you'll be needed to oversee quest sign-offs." Caught off guard, Melina hesitated briefly before nodding. "Very well, I shall heed your advice, my lord." As Thorian began to ascend the stairs, Melina called out, "If I may ask, my lord, how do you maintain such dignity? Whenever I speak with you, it feels as if I'm conversing with an elven noble." Thorian raised an eyebrow at her query, then let out a soft chuckle. "You seek my secrets while keeping your own. Perhaps one day we'll both be more forthcoming." With that, Thorian continued upstairs to the council chamber. Taking his seat at the head of the table, he settled in to wait for the arrival of his trusted advisors, his thoughts filled with both the immediate tasks and the broader visions for his burgeoning realm. Thorian waited until all the unit leaders took their seats around the table before commencing the meeting. "I see that each of you has received the rewards for achieving the last milestone," he said, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That accomplishment is a testament to your hard work. Be proud of yourselves." Half the room erupted in cheers at Thorian's commendation. "Those sleepless nights have finally paid off," Forlun declared, laughter rumbling deep within his chest. Pride radiated from his face as he glanced at his moonlight saber. Around the table, other council members also brandished their recently acquired weapons. Predictably, Ventus, Saxum, and Aqua were armed with staves attuned to the elements of wind, earth, and water, respectively. Ifrit carried an Emberstrike cane, identical to the one Thorian himself had been awarded. Lapis, now a guardian, was entrusted with a massive tower shield, while his brother Vivax wielded an imposing greatsword. Zogthar, both a high orc and a berserker, gripped a formidable war axe. The chaos this group could unleash if set loose in any city of the kingdom would be beyond reckoning, Thorian thought. His face lit up with a broad smile filled with pride for his comrades' progress. However, he was also keenly aware that they couldn't afford to grow complacent. The world was full of uncertainties that made any notion of safety an illusion. Taking a deep breath to center himself, Thorian began his address. "Before we delve into the issues concerning the village and the goblin assimilation, I have some advice to offer you, my most loyal and esteemed comrades." He shifted his gaze to his right, where Lapis, Vivax, Forlun, and Zogthar were seated. "For those of you who engage in hand-to-hand combat, it's crucial that you concentrate on mastering your weapons and shields. Over time, this will become your greatest source of strength and growth. Do not neglect it." "Your counsel is most appreciated, my king," Zogthar replied, his voice resonating with a deep timbre. Acknowledging the gesture with a subtle nod, Thorian then turned his attention to the Magi. "For those of you in the arcane arts, the trajectory of your advancement is tied to the spells you master. Use them both strategically and consistently." "We understand, my king," Aqua affirmed. Seated at his left, Vigil received Thorian's advice last. "As a devotee of the moon goddess, Silnora, you might consider speaking with your guild master to deepen your understanding of her teachings. The more you immerse yourself in her faith, the likelier it is that you'll be offered quests which could reward you with her unique skills critical for your growth." Thank you for your wisdom, my king, Vigil said, bowing his head slightly. I will heed your advice. With a nod, Thorian scanned the faces of everyone around the table. Now that we've covered individual progress, let's move on to the issue of the village. He turned his gaze to Forlun, seated to his right. Have you noticed anything unusual regarding the goblins? Just some minor complaints, largely from those pompous champions, Forlun replied, his voice tinged with amusement. Beyond that, nothing interesting. Most of them went off to sleep just an hour after receiving their citizenship. That could become a source of concern, Aqua interjected. Seeds of discontent must be nipped in the bud. Should I teach them a lesson in respect? Zogther rumbled, his voice tinged with disdain. To speak ill of a man who has shown them nothing but kindness is unacceptable. This is why I don't like those scrawny fellows. What about Bricks? Ventus interjected, laughter filling his voice. You seem to like his singing. Bricks is different, Zogther conceded, lowering his voice as if admitting a well-kept secret. Reclaiming the room's attention, Thorian spoke with authority. Here's what I want you to focus on, demonstrating clear superiority. Each of our warriors is worth at least 20 or 30 of theirs. That goes without saying, my king, Forlun chimed in, laughing heartily. I alone could slay 200 of those goblins, and even the least among my men could take down 100. You're absolutely right, Lapis added, joining in the laughter. They may outnumber us, but they certainly don't outclass us. Sensing the escalating animosity, Thorian decided to defuse the situation. Let's not get carried away. These goblins have submitted to my authority and are now part of our community. We need to be cautious but not hostile, otherwise we may well sow the seeds of discord ourselves. The room quieted at Thorian's admonishment, the atmosphere immediately becoming more restrained. Vigil, seated beside Thorian, appeared visibly pleased by the king's intervention. Additionally, as part of their surrender agreement, the 3 goblin elders were promised positions as unit leaders, Thorian continued. Given our sudden influx of new members, I think it's time to re-evaluate our military structure. If anyone has suggestions or ideas, now is the time to share them. A brief silence followed Thorian's words, before being interrupted by murmurs and whispered discussions among the members. Aqua eventually broke through the chatter. While this doesn't directly relate to the military structure, it's important to note that we should separate the goblin champions from their elders. We ought to create integrated units of kobolds, goblins, and orcs. This will prevent them from merely reconstituting their original groups within our community. A commendable idea, Aqua, Thorian responded, nodding appreciatively at the blue kobold. To add to your suggestion, each smaller squad should share a communal living space, eating and sleeping together. I believe this will help to shift their loyalties from their former leaders to their new comrades in arms. Your wisdom never ceases to impress, my king, Saxum offered respectfully, eliciting another nod from Thorian. Thorian steered the conversation in a new direction. Beyond the interpersonal dynamics, how do we envision the formal organization of our forces? Any suggestions? Zogther, after a thoughtful pause, said, Might I suggest adopting a structure similar to the traditional Orcish military, my king? Thorian gestured encouragingly. Please share your insights. Drawing himself up, Zogther began to outline his proposal. At the pinnacle stands you, my king, as the supreme commander. Directly beneath you, 2 generals should helm the entire force, each overseeing a full company. Each general would have under them 4 unit leaders, who in turn would have squadron leaders reporting to them. Envisioning the numbers, a squadron would consist of 14 fighters, making a unit 60 strong. Thus, a complete company would comprise 240 warriors. Thorian reflected on Zogther's proposition, then scanned the room. Does anyone have reservations or critiques regarding Zogther's proposed structure? Forlun, the moon kobold, was swift to respond. I see no issue. Appraising the rest of his council and noting their agreement, Thorian offered Zogther a smile of approval. Your input has been invaluable, Zogther. We'll move forward with the structure you've outlined. It's an honor to serve, my king, Zogther replied, bowing slightly, pride evident in his demeanor. Thorian acknowledged the group before delving into the next topic, the allocation of leadership roles. Ultimately, the 2 pivotal roles of generals were granted to Forlun and Zogther. Zogther's rich military background made him a natural choice. This decision underscored Thorian's commitment to meritocracy, underscoring that race held no sway in his considerations. As for the unit leader positions, 3 had been set aside for the goblin elders. The remaining 5 were awarded to Lapis, Vivax, Saxum, Vigil, and Aqua. Both Ifrit and Ventus initially bristled at being overlooked, but Thorian's clarification about the administrative duties tied to the role quickly tempered their discontent, as neither relished the thought of tedious bureaucratic responsibilities. Having resolved the leadership assignments, Thorian steered the conversation toward the second pressing issue, the quest to defend Loxley. Given his prior experience with similar quests, Thorian emphasized the significant rewards at stake. He urged his council to ensure their subordinates accepted the quest without delay. As the session drew to a close, Thorian had one final directive, primarily for his newly appointed generals. Before we conclude, I'd like you both to introduce the goblins to the 4 major guilds. Subsequently, direct them here to retrieve their daily quests. He cast a sweeping gaze over the assembly. Once that's accomplished, gather all our combatants and reorganize them as per the structure we've delineated. Remember to integrate the different races effectively. Forlun responded with an assured nod, "Rest easy, my king. I will make sure that the job is done correctly." Thorian gave a final nod of approval. "I have every confidence in all of you. Our discussions are done, now we act." As the council members dispersed, Thorian motioned for Zogthar to remain behind. "Zogthar, a moment of your time. There's a matter I'd like to discuss with you." The High Orc looked momentarily perplexed but complied, waiting patiently as the chamber emptied of the other council members. Once they were alone, he approached Thorian, his expression earnest. "My king, I am deeply honored by the trust you've placed in me by appointing me as general." Thorian held up a hand, interrupting. "Your appointment was based on merit and you deserve it. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you." He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "My concern lies with the representation of your race in our village. The orcs are few in number." Zogthar looked momentarily taken aback, but then his face settled into a somber expression. "It's true, we are not numerous, but each of my kin is fiercely dedicated. I assure you, we'll work tirelessly to meet, if not exceed, your expectations, my king. I don't question your commitment or the quality of your warriors, but the reality remains, you're underrepresented," Thorian said, his tone somber. He took a deep breath before continuing, "Are there more orcs residing in this forest that we should be aware of?" Zogthar exhaled heavily. "It's uncertain, but it's likely that there are other tribes." Thorian scratched his furry chin, deep in thought, before posing another question. "If we were to encounter another orc tribe, would they be amenable to joining us under peaceful terms?" Zogthar paused for a moment, carefully considering his next words. When he finally spoke, his gaze was unwavering. "They would not. In Orcish tradition, allegiance is never given freely to someone who hasn't proven their worth in combat." Leaning back into his chair, Thorian let out a sigh of disappointment. "That is a shame." As Thorian completed his most urgent tasks, he descended the stairs to collect his daily quests. His next stop was the Cultivation Hall, a towering structure that held the promise of unlocking new levels of power. As he neared the entrance, Thorian's thoughts turned to the near future. "Once I advance it to the 2nd tier, the Hall Master will come. Then, everyone in the village can begin their own journey of cultivation," he mused. Considering the nascent stage of the apocalypse, with only a few territories yet claimed, his subordinates would be cultivating by the 3rd day, remarkably early by any standard. A sense of accomplishment swelled within Thorian. Inside the hall, he chose his regular chamber. Setting aside his cane and robe at the doorway, he moved to the room's center. Taking a lotus position, Thorian began his session by focusing on his breathing technique. This session felt significantly smoother than his previous endeavors. Having already breached the first gate, known as the Ashen Ember, Thorian concentrated on accumulating chi within his dantian, the energy center located in the lower abdomen. This chi was then refined as it passed through the first gate. While he was aware of other meridian paths, Thorian knew he could not cultivate them until reaching the 2nd realm. Undeterred by the limitations, he focused solely on increasing the volume of chi he could accumulate and purify. Maintaining this disciplined approach, Thorian continued to cultivate for a full 2.5 hours, committed to his steady progression. Completing his cultivation session, Thorian wasn't taken aback by the dark, viscous substance that had exuded from his pores. The surrounding muck emitted a familiar, acrid stench. This was not his first experience with such a phenomenon, so he skillfully employed the same old cleansing technique to expel the repugnant black goo from the room and into the exterior of the hall. Following that, he summoned a series of water orbs to cleanse himself, rendering his aroma somewhat tolerable. Gazing back at the cultivation hall, Thorian cracked a wry smile. Once everyone starts cultivating, this place will resemble a pigsty more than a sanctuary. He expelled a deep sigh, letting go of his concerns for the moment. Solutions would arise when needed, there was no use in fretting about them now. Instead, he opened his status panel, eager to assess the progress he had made in his cultivation journey. Display panel. Ding. Race Flame Kobold. Level 23/30th EXP, 3782/6800. Class Elemental Magus. Level 20/40th EXP, 172/6600. Lifespan 40 years. Cultivation Realm Chi Gathering 5th Stage, 1.2%. Stats. Strength 108. Agility 119. Constitution 87. Mana 103. Chi 100. Free points 15. I've actually broken through to the 5th stage? Thorian whispered, his voice tinged with exhilaration. This should be enough stat points to elevate my constitution to 100. Without a moment's delay, Thorian allocated 13 of his available points to his weakest stat. Constitution, 87 à 100. Requirement fulfilled, new skill unlocked. Jack of all trades. Description: possessing a well-rounded physique and intellect, you excel at acquiring and integrating new knowledge. You can master any skill 10% faster. Proficiency max. A satisfied smirk spread across Thorian's face. It's fortunate I remembered this skill early on. That 10% acceleration in mastering skills will have a longer time to compound its benefits. Pleased with his progress, Thorian looked skyward. The village's twin suns had fully risen, and the sounds of bustling activity signaled the onset of a new day. 2.5 hours had elapsed since the end of the meeting, prompting him to check on the status of his two generals, Forlun and Zogthar. To his relief, they had efficiently executed the tasks he'd assigned. Most of the goblins had already been allocated their classes, filling each guild to its maximum capacity of 100 members. Those goblins who hadn't yet received a class would be assigned one as soon as the village advanced a level, allowing for guild upgrades. The revamped military hierarchy was now fully operational, with squads, units, and companies meticulously organized. Per Thorian's directive, each squad was intentionally diverse, featuring a blend of all three species under his command. Goblins held the majority in each squad, a logical consequence of their numerical preeminence. Thorian's next set of orders focused on the expeditious completion of daily quests. He devised a rotating system wherein 2 units at a time would venture into the first layer of the verdant labyrinth, while the remaining forces maintained vigilance at home. Upon their return, each unit would submit the requisite 100 units of wood at the territory altar before resuming their guard posts at the outer wall. Here, they would swap duties with another pair of units, continuing this cycle until all daily quests were accomplished. The entire operation took a comprehensive 4 hours. Thorian, however, did not squander this time in idleness. He joined one of the dungeon runs to complete his own set of daily quests, subsequently dedicating the remaining hours to honing his mana manipulation skills. Alongside Harold, he sat cross-legged in their familiar training spot, each deeply engrossed in mastering the flow of mana within their bodies. Once he received confirmation that all daily quests had been fulfilled, Thorian knew the stage was set. Finally, he could commence his true agenda for the day. Territory resources. Resources. Gathered experience 41.5k. Wood units 35.4k. Good, that should be more than enough, Thorian mused. Upgrade village. Upgrade conditions. 500 registered citizens. 10,000 gathered experience. Upgrade all available buildings. Conditions fulfilled. Do you wish to upgrade the Wolvendale village to stage 3? Yes, I wish. Realm advancement. A now familiar sweep of blue light engulfed the village, pushing Thorian to protect his eyes. Display territory. Surveying the expansive territory map laid out before him, Thorian made a decisive choice. Upgrade the Magus Guild. Upgrade the Warrior Guild. Upgrade the Assassin Guild. Upgrade the Priest Guild. And upgrade the Cultivation Hall. A deep, resonant rumble echoed throughout the village, capturing the immediate attention of its inhabitants. The 4 principal guilds underwent a remarkable transformation. Each expanded its footprint, its architectural details now radiating both elegance and grandeur. As for the cultivation hall, its metamorphosis was even more dramatic. What had been a few modest chambers morphed into a corridor lined with 12 rooms, crowned by an imposing edifice at its end. Yet, for all the splendor of the upgraded buildings, Thorian's focus was undiverted. His interest lay solely in the Assassin Guild. "I trust the renovations haven't inconvenienced you too severely, Nox," he murmured as he stepped into the revamped guild hall. The space had significantly expanded, complete with a new bulletin board affixed to the right wall, displaying a handful of quests. He barely glanced at them. "Is Nox unharmed?" Thorian inquired, directing his gaze toward Whisperwind, the guildmaster. The enigmatic figure shook his head reassuringly. "No need for concern. I've just verified, Nox is perfectly well." Relieved, Thorian exited the guild and made his way to his own domain. There, perched atop a desk as if it were a throne, stood Fizzlegrin. His grin stretched from ear to ear as he marveled at the transformation of his domain, utterly enchanted by the grandeur that now surrounded him. "You appear quite pleased," Thorian observed, approaching Fizzlegrin with a warm smile. "What do you think of the guild's new aesthetics?" "Absolutely enchanted." "It's so much more spacious," Fizzlegrin enthused, his eyes alight with glee. "Finally, I've got shelves for those endless parchments and skill scrolls. Organizing this place used to be an absolute nightmare." Thorian chuckled softly, clearly pleased. "I'm glad it meets your approval." His eyes shifted toward the bulletin board before adding, "These seem like quests, don't they? Am I permitted to take them on?" "Certainly," Fizzlegrin replied, hopping down from his desk with agility. He ambled over to the board, a spring in his step. "At present, you may only take on the default quests. But with further upgrades, you'll even have the option to post quests yourself as the lord of this territory." "Ah, that could be useful," Thorian mused, scratching his chin as if contemplating this newfound revelation. "I take it you want all three?" Fizzlegrin inquired, grabbing a chair to elevate himself and reach the bulletins. With a small stretch, he unfastened all three parchments from the board. Thorian nodded. The subsequent procedure mirrored that of the village hall, facilitating his acceptance of all three quests. Finally, Thorian summoned his quest journal to review his new responsibilities. "Show journal," he commanded mentally, eager to dive into his next adventure. Journal. Spellcasting rank. Mana control rank. Mana infusione rank. As Thorian perused his quest journal, Fizzlegrin's voice broke his concentration. "Shall we dive into the quests right away, or do you have other obligations that demand your attention first?" "Other matters can wait," Thorian declared, snapping his journal shut. "Let's begin without delay." "In that case, follow me," Fizzlegrin said, leading the way to a room on the left. Thorian followed him into a space he had never seen before, a recent addition following the guild's renovation. Rows of tables filled the area, leading to a small, secluded cabin at the far end. "We'll start with mana control," Fizzlegrin announced, navigating his way between the tables. Thorian trailed behind, his eyes cast downward to ensure he didn't step on the small guild master who barely reached his knees. Upon entering the cabin, Thorian found himself surrounded by walls adorned with shelves filled with arcane tools. The floor beneath him was covered by a mat intricately inscribed with arcane symbols. "Please sit down cross-legged in the center of the room," Fizzlegrin instructed. His youthful voice carried an unusual gravitas. "Today's lesson will focus solely on mana sensing. If you show some level of aptitude, we should be able to advance to the next phase by week's end." Suppressing a chuckle, Thorian complied, seating himself as directed. Fizzlegrin commenced his tutorial with a fervor. "The initial step requires you to attune yourself to the mana within your own body. Only then can you extend your senses outward to perceive the ambient mana around you." "I can already do so, Guild Master," Thorian revealed, channeling mana into his hand until it glowed with ethereal light. "I can even manipulate it to a certain extent." "Oh my," Fizzlegrin examined Thorian's illuminated hand, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Is that a result of one of your acquired skills?" "Yes, I was fortunate to gain the skill of mana manipulation from a dungeon," Thorian elaborated. "I've also dedicated some time to mastering it." "In that case, how fortuitous," Fizzlegrin remarked, nodding approvingly. "If you're already capable of internal mana sensing, consider today's mana control quest fulfilled. Let's proceed to mana infusion." With that, Fizzlegrin led the way out of the cabin, and Thorian followed closely behind. "Have a seat wherever you like," Fizzlegrin gestured toward the rows of tables. "I'll fetch a mana rock for you to infuse." Thorian chose a table and settled down, his eyes following Fizzlegrin as he exited the room. Moments later, the Buzzlekin returned, cradling a nondescript, gray pebble in his palm. At first glance, it was so unremarkable that Thorian would have dismissed it had he encountered it anywhere else. "This is what's known as a depleted mana rock," Fizzlegrin elucidated, placing the stone before Thorian. "Your task is to rejuvenate it, to imbue it with your own mana until it's restored to its former vitality. Exercise caution, though, improper infusion could cause the rock to shatter." When Fizzlegrin passed the depleted mana rock to Thorian, a rueful smile danced on the latter's lips. To be back to such fundamental exercises, he mused internally. Thorian gently swirled the stone within his hand, reflecting on past endeavors. With his former vessel, such a task would have been as thoughtless as breathing. But now, trapped within an unfamiliar form, devoid of his previous muscle memory and instincts, he was tasked with reacquainting himself with the rudiments of his craft. Fixating on the rock nestled in his hand, Thorian began to coax his mana forward, drawing it out in a measured, delicate dance. It was a fine line to tread, ensuring the energy wasn't too little to be ineffective, yet not so overpowering that it would rupture the fragile stone. Guiding his mana to the surface of his palm, he gently urged it into the stone. The rock remained inert, resisting his attempts. The mana was too sparse, unable to penetrate the stone's innate barriers. Undeterred, Thorian channeled a stronger surge, willing it into the rock. Still, the stone remained unchanged. Recognizing that he was undershooting, Thorian gathered a more potent concentration of mana, preparing to infuse it once more into the rock, hoping this time to strike the right balance. Crack! With a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, the mana rock shattered into two pieces on Thorian's palm. "It's a trickier task than it appears, isn't it?" Fizzlegrin's chuckle broke the tense atmosphere. Reaching into a pouch that appeared almost comically oversized due to his diminutive stature, he climbed onto a chair and emptied its contents onto the table. "Feel free to experiment until you find your rhythm. A 10% success rate would be considered quite proficient." "Only 10%, you say?" Thorian's smile carried a nostalgic tinge. "I apologize in advance, Guildmaster. My journey of trial and error may prove rather boring to you." "Don't concern yourself with that," Fizzlegrin dismissed with a wave of his hand. "For now, there's not much that needs my attention in this new guild. Observing your first steps into the world of magic is entertainment enough." "Very well," Thorian nodded, selecting another depleted mana rock. As he held it, his focus narrowed to a pinpoint, the rest of the world dissolved into irrelevance. Having suffered his initial failure, Thorian made a slight adjustment, reducing the mana he directed into the rock. The result was the same, another resounding crack. Undeterred, Thorian selected another stone from the pile, his demeanor unflinching. It was as if the previous failures were mere data points in an ongoing experiment. Again, he tuned the mana, reducing its intensity before attempting infusion. And again, the stone fragmented. Once more, Thorian picked up a depleted mana rock, this time subtly diminishing the surge of mana he sent into it, just as he had in the previous failed attempts. This time, however, the rock remained whole. His mana trickled into its core, as if accepted by the stone itself. Thorian's face remained composed, absent of exuberance. Breaking past the initial hurdle of mana infusion was but a small victory. Now came the intricate work, the arduous task of navigating his mana through the minuscule labyrinth that constituted the rock's interior. With deliberate intent, he delved his mana deeper into the stone. Crack! Unfazed, Thorian reached for another stone. The series of failures that ensued did not plague his spirits, his demeanor remained as steely as ever. Each unsuccessful attempt was a lesson, a chance to fine-tune his approach, devoid of any self-imposed judgments regarding success or failure. After what felt like an eternity, Thorian achieved his second minor victory, a stone that pulsed with an otherworldly blue glow, the depleted mana rock now brimming with arcane vitality. Silently, he placed the infused stone aside, reaching for another depleted specimen. Work was far from over. Crack! 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 Despite the initial breakthrough, Thorian knew that each rock presented its own unique puzzle. Each contained a different pattern of channels and reservoirs where the mana was stored. Rote memorization could offer no shortcuts. To truly master the art of mana infusion, Thorian needed to refine his intuitive sense, to feel the ebb and flow of his mana as it navigated the intricate pathways within each unique stone. Thus, ensconced in a near-trance state, Thorian continued his Sisyphean task. The outer world blurred, its mundane distractions fading away, leaving him alone with the complexity of the stones and the ever-shifting landscape of his own inner mana. Atop the table, Fizzlegrin gazed in astonishment as Thorian sifted through the mound of spent mana rocks. The moment the flame kobold imbued his first stone, pride welled up inside Fizzlegrin, urging him to commend the impressive feat. But the words remained captive in his throat, held there by the sight of Thorian's unwavering, almost mesmeric concentration. Such a deep immersion, a marriage of mind and task, was a rare sight, and Fizzlegrin would not be the one to shatter that sacred moment. He's processing these rocks at a staggering pace. More are needed. Silently, Fizzlegrin cleared away the shards and remnants, and with quiet care, he replaced them with a fresh heap of depleted rocks, ensuring they lay in the exact same position as before. He knew the importance of rhythm, the sanctity of flow. Time seemed to blur and meld as Thorian continued his meticulous task. Fizzlegrin's role had become one of silent support, replenishing when necessary and clearing away the debris. As he watched Thorian, there was an unmistakable glint of joy in his eyes, a reminiscent warmth. Witnessing someone lose themselves entirely to their passion-evoked memories, reminding the guild master of his own fervent days of youth. ******. Thorian's hands moved with practiced ease, instinctively selecting each rock, allowing him to focus his entire concentration on honing his mana sense. Infusing the stones with mana was a delicate task, akin to threading a needle through gossamer fabric. It required a precise balance of force and direction, an intuition he had gained through grueling hours of practice and mountains of depleted mana rocks. But just as he was about to complete the infusion for yet another rock, he hit an invisible wall. His mana simply dissipated, refusing to push any further. Confusion was quickly replaced by the sudden awareness of fatigue flooding his senses. He was drained, his mana reserves entirely depleted. His gaze lifted from the table to find Fizzlegrin's broad smile waiting to greet him. "You have quite the deep well of mana, my lord," Fizzlegrin remarked, clearly impressed. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to last this long. You've surprised me." Gathering himself for a moment, Thorian asked the first question that sprang to mind. "How many rocks did I successfully infuse?" 73, Fizzlegrin answered, grinning even wider. "As for the ones you broke, that would be 535. That puts your overall success rate at 13%. So this places me just above the rank of an adept?" Thorian sighed, struggling against the overwhelming urge to collapse. His depleted mana was one thing, but the mental exhaustion weighed even heavier. Fizzlegrin glanced wryly at the overflowing bin of discarded rocks before returning his gaze to Thorian. "If you look at your last 200 attempts, you'll find your success rate was closer to 17%. That's edging towards the territory of an expert rather than an adept." A ripple of pride surged through Thorian, and he nodded, smiling faintly. "That's heartening to hear. Still, I've consumed quite a few of your depleted mana rocks. I hope I haven't strained your reserves." Fizzlegrin burst into laughter. "Worry not. At this early stage, I have enough reserves to keep 100 of you busy for a month." Though Thorian smiled in return, his gaze began to wander. The conversation was engaging, but he could no longer ignore the siren call of deep-rooted fatigue. "It's been a pleasure, Guild Master," Thorian said, rising from his chair and fighting to keep his eyes open. "I'll take my leave for now. I'll return later to complete the remaining quest." "As you wish, my lord," Fizzlegrin replied, his tone crisp yet understanding of Thorian's mental state. With that, Thorian exited the guild, making his way towards his home. As he moved through the living room, he noticed Harold was conspicuously absent. He must have already woken up. With that final observation, Thorian mustered just enough energy to reach his bed. The moment his head touched the pillow, he surrendered to sleep, drifting away into a well-deserved rest. *****. Perched on the ledge of the village's outer wall, Aqua surveyed the land beyond. Although the fire from yesterday had consumed the remains of monsters from their earlier battles, fresh carcasses now lay atop the ashen vestiges. 2 squadrons under his command patrolled the immediate area, while the remaining 2 ventured deeper into the forest, scouting for any lurking threats. A rustling from the tree line snapped Aqua's attention back to the present. Bursting from the woods, a trio of thumpalumps, giant horned rabbits, charged at the patrolling goblins. A wave of shrill cries erupted from the troops. Just as the razor-sharp horns of the thumpalumps were about to skewer a greenhorn goblin, Aqua conjured 3 small spheres of water. With swift precision, he launched them at the approaching beasts, each sphere finding its mark and felling the creatures. Thank you. The nearly impaled goblin looked up toward the wall, relief flooding his features as he thanked his unit leader. Aqua responded with a brief nod, then shifted his gaze to Brix, the shaman apprentice who was napping atop the wall, basking in the sunlight. "Brix, you should be watching your men," Aqua chided the lackadaisical goblin. Rising with a yawn, Brix replied nonchalantly, "I was, in a manner of speaking. Besides, there's little I could have done in that situation. My expertise lies in healing and blessings, not combat." "That's your domain, Magus." Aqua's brow furrowed, preparing a retort, but before he could speak, a deep rumble echoed from within the village, cutting him off.
"What's that? An earthquake?"
One of the goblin foot soldiers looked up, terror widening his eyes. "No, it's not," Aqua reassured, his gaze drawn back to the village where a plume of dust had erupted from its center. "Our king is upgrading the village." "Already?" Brix perked up, following Aqua's line of sight. "Wonder what's changed this time. The last upgrade brought that enormous building, but it was empty, just some empty rooms." "It serves a purpose, I'm sure," Aqua mused, his eyes thoughtful. "I've seen our king enter it multiple times. There must be something in there that transcends our understanding." "Makes sense," Brix said, his expression turning mischievous. "Want to go check out what's new?" "I'm curious." Aqua arched an eyebrow at Brix's suggestion. "We have a duty to guard this wall. What would you do if an enemy force invaded while we were off exploring?" Brix stifled a laugh, turning his gaze toward the units patrolling beyond the wall. "Who in this forest could possibly challenge such an army?" He gestured at the diverse troops, mainly goblins, but also 2 high orcs, 4 evolved kobolds, and a goblin champion leading the 2nd squadron. "Come on, we won't be long," Brix urged, waving away Aqua's concerns with a flick of his wrist. Aqua weighed the options, his eyes darting between the village center and the 2 patrolling squadrons. Finally he exhaled a deep sigh. "Fine, but we make it quick." Brix's eyes widened for a moment before he nodded approvingly. "I knew you had a sense of adventure in you." Muttering under his breath, Aqua followed Brix toward the inner village. The first thing they noticed, along with the throng of curious civilians, were the newly transformed guild halls. While still made of wood, the structures now boasted an updated, richer texture, and their color had deepened to a glowing dark brown from the previous light hue. Yet it was the mysterious building that immediately seized Aqua's attention. It had expanded dramatically, now featuring a dozen visible rooms flanking a central corridor, even from their distant vantage point. "Shall we go explore?" Brix asked, his eyes mirroring Aqua's curiosity. With a nod, Aqua agreed, and the 2 made their way toward the cultivation hall. The civilian crowd of goblins and kobolds watched in awe but kept their distance, allowing Aqua and Brix to move easily through them and into the building. Once inside, they encountered 2 elderly figures, each sporting long beards but dressed in contrasting robes, one in light yellow and the other in dark purple. To their surprise, the elders were in deep conversation with 2 familiar figures. "Ah, Ifrit and Ventus are already here?" Brix observed, his eyes narrowing as he recognized their 2 friends. On the other hand, Aqua's brow furrowed further at the sight of the 2 elemental kobolds. "You're supposed to be on duty at the southern gate," he admonished, marching deliberately toward them.
"Huh, who is talking to me like that?"
Ventus spun around, a sardonic grin splitting his face. "I should have guessed. It is Mr. Killjoy coming in person."
"And what about you?"
Ifrit retorted. "Aren't you assigned to the northern gate? Seems hypocritical to lecture us on duty." Aqua's normally blue cheeks flushed a shade of red. He opened his mouth to reply but caught himself, his eyes darting toward Brix, who was wearing an insufferably smug look. "Didn't think you had it in you to bend the rules," Ventus taunted, taking further pleasure in Aqua's discomfort. Then his gaze shifted to Brix, and understanding dawned on his face.
"Ah, so it was you, Brix.
Now it makes sense. For a moment, I thought Aqua had grown a personality." The tension was broken by the old man in the yellow robe, who stepped in with a warm, jovial laugh. "Why don't we all just calm down? Although I must say, I thought I'd seen everything with elemental kobolds. A talking goblin certainly adds more color to the picture." "Indeed, our time here promises to be most interesting," added the 2nd elder, hands clasped behind his back. Aqua, grateful for the intervention, cleared his throat. "My name is Aqua. May I have the honor of knowing your names, gentlemen, and what exactly this place is?" The yellow-robed elder stroked his beard, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. "It seems the lord of this village hasn't fully briefed you yet. No matter.
I am Lai Jie, and this is Jingsu. Then, with a sweeping gesture, he introduced the impressive structure around them. Welcome to the Cultivation Hall. Before we initiate you into the art of meditation and cultivation, we must first discern the natural inclination of your constitution, declared the yellow-robed elder, Lai Jie, his voice tinged with excitement and a wild smile gracing his features. He subtly nodded toward Jingsu, who promptly stepped forward. Clad in purple robes that fluttered slightly with his movement, Jingsu approached Aqua and began to elucidate. The paths you may tread are yin and yang, order and chaos, ice and fire. Understand, however, that they are not embodiments of good and evil. As Jingsu placed his palm gently on Aqua's back, the blue kobold experienced an extraordinary sensation. A chilling energy, surpassing even the coldest ice he had ever conjured, began to seep through him. This one is attuned to yin, Jingsu announced, withdrawing his hand as the icy sensation subsided. Leaning closer to Aqua, his voice softened, your constitution is good, suited for my training. Aqua, still reeling from the experience, found it hard to grasp Jingsu's words fully. The chilling energy that had coursed through his body was not painful, rather, it was exhilarating, liberating. It felt as though it unlocked dormant parts within him, awakening a newfound sense of freedom and potential. Aqua was jolted back to the present as Jingsu finished assessing everyone's natural affinity. Ifrit and Ventus had a predisposition towards yang energy, while both Aqua and Brix resonated more with the yin path. The group swiftly divided, each duo accompanying their respective mentor to separate rooms at opposite ends of the corridor. In the lotus position, please, Jingsu instructed. Noticing the puzzled expressions on Aqua and Brix's faces, he revised his approach. Forget that. Sit comfortably, and I'll guide you. Aqua and Brix complied, positioning themselves side by side with a hint of hesitance. Space yourselves out a bit, you'll need room, Jingsu advised, demonstrating as he elegantly crossed his legs into the lotus position. Relax your muscles. It will come naturally. Aqua attempted to mimic Jingsu, the elder assisting by gently pushing his knees outward. The position stretched his thighs taut, akin to overdried jerky, teetering on the brink of snapping. Aqua clenched his teeth, drawing deep, calming breaths, striving to ease the tension in his muscles. Brix effortlessly settled into a flawless lotus position, his less developed thigh muscles posing no obstacle, unlike the sturdier build of the kobolds. The seriousness of the situation didn't completely suppress his mischievous nature. A snicker escaped him as he observed Aqua's struggle. Aqua, hearing the sound, could only respond with a subdued grunt, focusing on his posture. Excellent, you're both correctly seated in the lotus position, Jingsu acknowledged, positioning himself in front of them. His tone shifted to one of earnest instruction. Before you embark on meditation and cultivation, there are essential concepts you must grasp about both the yin and yang paths. This foundational understanding is vital for anyone beginning their journey. He paused briefly, clearing his throat for emphasis. The initial phase of cultivation involves gathering qi during meditation. This qi, in its original form, is colorless and pure, untainted. To harness its potential, you must infuse it with your essence, your spirit. This process allows you to manipulate, transform, and even create the very laws of the universe. It's through this personalization of qi that your true cultivation begins. Jingsu's voice deepened, becoming a hushed, captivating timbre as he delved deeper into his explanation. This shift in tone drew Aqua and Brix in, their attention captivated as if by a gravitational pull. And remember, he continued, all universal laws, fire, ice, earth, sand, poison, illusions, blessings, and curses originate from the two primary paths, yin and yang. Some mistakenly equate yang with righteousness and yin with malevolence, good with yang and evil with yin. Dismiss such notions. Both yin and yang can manifest as good or evil. The purest forms of yin and yang are the roots of true evil, yet it is in their interaction, their balance, where true goodness emerges. Yin and yang should not be perceived as separate entities, but as two halves of a singular, harmonious whole. Noticing the furrowed brows of Aqua, signaling confusion, Jingsu chuckled softly, his beard rustling as he stroked it. Fear not the complexity of these concepts. Clarity will come as you progress in your cultivation journey. He then repositioned Aqua and Brix, guiding them to sit back to back, and took his place between them. First, master control over your breathing. Become aware of your surroundings. Attune your senses to the ether in the air. Only then can you start to absorb it through your pores and external paths. Guided by Jingsu's instructions, Aqua closed his eyes, channeling his entire focus into harmonizing with the rhythm of his breath.
As he inhaled and exhaled, he gradually began to merge with the essence of nature surrounding him. The external world, with all its cacophony and chaos, slowly faded away, leaving Aqua in a serene cocoon of concentration. His awareness honed in on the elusive ether drifting through the air, embracing it with a newfound sensitivity. As the grip of slumber loosened, Thorian's eyes fluttered open, greeting what should have been a new day. However, the sun, having already soared past its zenith, indicated a day well underway. I despise daytime sleep, he thought, rising with a grunt. Donning his robe and staff, Thorian stepped out of his house. The village was bustling, civilians engaged in their daily routines. He observed some wielding basic swords and shields, others delicately handling herbs for alchemists. Goblin women were busy crafting garments and decorating their homes, their nimble fingers weaving fabrics into practical and ornamental items. Reflecting on the absence of official professions and workshops, Thorian noted how natural it seemed for everyone to carry on with their tasks. After 10 years in this system, such simplicity feels almost alien, he mused, a smile curving his lips. His attention was drawn to the sound of laughter. Young goblins and kobolds played tag, their joyful shrieks echoing through the air. Thorian chuckled, amused that this game transcended worlds and species. Shaking off his reverie, he prepared to face the day's challenges. Topping his agenda was a visit to the one upgraded building he hadn't yet explored, the cultivation hall. Thorian's thoughts meandered as he strode towards the cultivation hall. With the arrival of the Yin and Yang masters due to this upgrade, perhaps even the kobolds and goblins can partake in the art of cultivation. I, being a cultivator myself, am proof it's possible. And who better to introduce meditation to a new species than the hall masters? He sought to quiet his inner doubts with this logic, continuing his march towards the hall. Yet, his contemplations were abruptly interrupted by an unusual commotion. Goblins and kobolds had gathered around the hall, maintaining a respectful distance from the building, their faces contorted in disgust, hence covering their noses. Thorian didn't need to inquire about the cause. Approaching the hall, a pungent, stomach-churning odor assaulted his senses. He instantly recognized it as the residue of monster cultivation, a scent he had become all too familiar with recently. This explains much, he thought, a forced half-smile appearing on his face as he pinched his nose and stepped inside. The hall housed 12 cultivation rooms, 6 flanking each side of the corridor. The stench intensified with each step Thorian took. He passed one vacant room after another until he reached the corridor's end, where he encountered a locked door, with 2 occupied rooms adjacent. Unsurprisingly, the source of the odious miasma was within these rooms, where figures sat cross-legged in deep cultivation. As Thorian observed his 4 friends deeply engrossed in their cultivation under the guidance of the 2 elders, he allowed himself a small smile before exiting the cultivation hall. The gathered crowd outside still lingered, piqued by curiosity and concern. Approaching them, Thorian singled out a goblin from the throng.
"Hey you," he called.
The goblin, taken aback, pointed to himself in bewilderment.
Me?"
"Yes, you," Thorian affirmed with a nod. "Do you know of anyone skilled in woodworking?" Confusion clouded the goblin's face briefly before he replied hesitantly, "No, I don't know anyone like that." "Then find someone who is," Thorian instructed firmly. "Spread the word in the village. It's an order from Thorian, your lord. Ask them to meet me at the village hall."
"Understood?"
The goblin, now imbued with a sense of purpose, nodded vigorously. "Why yes, I understand," he said, then scurried off, echoing Thorian's command throughout the village. Thorian, meanwhile, made his way to the village hall. Settling down with a cup of tea served by Melina, he awaited the arrival of a woodcrafting expert. Perhaps with their expertise, we can address this troublesome issue of cultivation black goo, he pondered, sipping his tea contemplatively.
My lord,"
the aged goblin announced as he entered the grand village hall, escorted by the earlier dispatched messenger. "I heard that you have asked for me. How may I be of help to you?" Thorian, seated in his chair, regarded the newcomer and rose to his feet. He approached the aged goblin with measured steps. "Are you a carpenter?" His voice carried a hint of expectation. "Yes, my lord. I have been carving wood my whole life," the old goblin replied, bowing with reverence. "No need for formalities," Thorian interjected, signaling for the goblin to rise.
"What name do you go by?"
"I am Hewer, my lord," the aged craftsman responded, a touch of unease in his tone. "Very well, Hewer," Thorian said, placing a reassuring hand on the goblin's shoulder as he drew nearer. "I have a project in mind, one I wish for you to oversee." If you demonstrate proficiency, I will ensure that you and your kin are granted a much larger home, right at the heart of our village. Your offer is a great honor, my lord. Hewer exclaimed, almost instinctively dropping to his knees. Tell me what I need to do and I swear I will not disappoint you, my lord. Thorian sighed softly, observing the elderly goblin humbling himself before him. Hewer, please. There's no need for such deference. Stand tall when in my presence. In a daze, the elderly carpenter gazed up at Thorian, who gently assisted him to his feet. Thorian proceeded to outline his plan. What I require from you are wooden tubs, enough to accommodate every warrior in our village. Do you grasp the scope of the task? Hewer hesitated momentarily. Why yes, I can make wooden tubs. However, it will take a long time to make the quantity you're asking me to, my lord. Have no concern for that, Thorian reassured him with a dismissive wave. Your task is to gather the skilled carpenters within our community. They shall work under your guidance on this endeavor. Inform them that this order is from me and assure them of generous compensation upon its completion. A glimmer of excitement sparked in the old goblin's eyes. I'm sure it would be an honor for them to work for you, my lord. Should I begin immediately? Of course, Thorian chuckled. The sooner, the better. With that directive, Hewer and the messenger departed the village hall. As they exited, Thorian released a faint sigh. It appears there is no rest for you, my lord. Melina emerged from an adjoining room, carrying a plate of biscuits. Observing the elven maiden, Thorian shook his head resolutely. Rest is unnecessary. Rest breeds complacency, and complacency breeds failure. At the declaration, Melina arched an eyebrow. She glanced at her plate of biscuits and shrugged. I suppose these are no longer needed, then. As she made a move to retreat into her chamber, Thorian halted her. Wait. A measure of rest is acceptable. Surprised by the mighty Thorian's concession, Melina couldn't help but chuckle softly. Without a word, she approached the table where Thorian sat and settled into the chair opposite him. As Thorian joined her, Melina inquired, What's your agenda for today? Thorian took a bite of one of the biscuits before explaining his agenda. With the cultivation hall now in order, that will be my primary focus. For that purpose, I require Hewer to craft as many wooden tubs as possible for our fighters to utilize in their cultivation. Without this provision, the village will emanate a foul stench by nightfall. Indeed, that would be far from ideal, Melina mused, rubbing her chin in thought. But waiting for the tubs to be finished might waste valuable days for cultivation, wouldn't it? You make a valid point, Thorian thought, his gaze drifting downward in contemplation. One solution might involve stationing water magi at the cultivation hall temporarily. Their primary task would be to cleanse the residual black remnants after each meditation session. I sympathize with whoever gets that duty, Melina chuckled lightly. Thorian echoed her amusement with a faint smile. I don't envy their responsibility either. Their conversation tapered off into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the sound of biscuit consumption. Eventually, Thorian finished the last morsel and made a move to rise. However, Melina halted him, seizing his wrist gently. You've yet to divulge the most crucial aspect of your plan. You're heading to Loxley soon, aren't you? She queried. Yes, I must complete that guardian quest, Thorian affirmed. Melina paused briefly before continuing, and after attending to the guardians, do you plan to remain in Loxley for an extended period? Thorian raised an eyebrow in response. Are you inquiring if I intend to retaliate against them? Is that your concern? Do you harbor sympathy for them after their attack on us? No, I don't harbor pity for those who attacked us, Melina asserted with a firm shake of her head. But I understand the plight of having peace disrupted by an external force that strips away everything you hold dear. Meeting Melina's resolute gaze, Thorian released a weary sigh. My course of action regarding them will hinge entirely on their conduct. If they demonstrate civility, I will engage in kind. Sensing Melina's loosening grip on his wrist, Thorian sighed softly. Well, I shall take my leave now. May fortune favor your journey, my lord, Melina bid him farewell. With those parting words, Thorian departed from the village hall. Contemplation swirled in his mind as he proceeded toward Forlun, his trusted general. Upon arrival, he updated Forlun on the cultivation hall's enhancements, tasking a team of water magi to manage the interim cleaning duties, a necessary measure while Hewer continued crafting the wooden tubs. Simultaneously, he briefed Forlun about the guild hall's upgrades and the newly unlocked quests.
Preferring not to micromanage, Thorian entrusted the communication of these advancements to Forlun and Zogarth, his two capable generals. Consequently, both the guilds and the bustling cultivation hall teemed with activity, frequented by fighters engaged in meditation or quest endeavors. Observing the fervent activity within the cultivation hall, Thorian emitted a soft click of his tongue, tinged with a hint of regret. I had intended to acquire a fundamental movement skill from the masters, but it seems they are occupied now. I'll have to postpone it until tomorrow. With a resigned sigh, Thorian pivoted, acknowledging the sunset that had draped Wolvendale village in the soothing embrace of the evening. The stars glittered in the expansive night sky, accompanied by the radiant glow of the twin moons casting their magical luminescence upon the forest. Before marshalling his forces for the impending journey toward Loxley, Thorian still had one crucial task remaining, claiming the rewards accrued from his guild quests. With a determined stride, he made his way toward the Magus Guild. This typically deserted establishment now bustled with youthful magi, kobolds and goblins alike. Some diligently honed their manipulation of mana, while others focused on perfecting their infusion techniques. A few attempted to attune themselves to the ambient mana, striving to connect with it devoid of the system's assistance.
"Oh, my lord?"
Fizzlegrin's unmistakably squeaky voice pierced through the bustling ambience. "Are you here to claim your completed quests?" "Yes, indeed, Guildmaster," Thorian affirmed with a nod, casting a glance around the lively guild hall. A chuckle escaped him. "I trust this newfound activity hasn't unsettled you too much."
"How could it?"
Fizzlegrin shook his head emphatically. "This is precisely how a guild should thrive, brimming with vitality and a thirst for knowledge." With a decisive gesture, the guild master retrieved his magical pin, swiftly confirming the fulfillment of Thorian's 3 Magus quests. "I hope the rewards are to your satisfaction, my lord." Fizzlegrin then happily hopped off his desk before attending to some young Magus. Looking at this scene, Thorian chuckled before checking his own gains. Personal resources. Arcane coins 2,856. Mystic marks 150. So, 50 mystic marks per quests? Not too bad. I can buy a first advancement skill with 3 days' worth of quests. Content with the progress at the guild, Thorian exited before proceeding toward the outer north wall, where Forlun was stationed. Upon arrival, he discovered the Moon Kobold perched atop the imposing gate, surveying the surroundings. As Forlun sensed Thorian's presence, he turned to address him. "My lord, is it time? Should I call upon our army?" "Yes, please proceed, Forlun," Thorian confirmed with a nod. "But summon only the fighters. The direwolves will remain to safeguard our village." Acknowledging the command with a respectful nod, Forlun suppressed a feral grin. "Understood, my lord. Your wishes shall be carried out." Having imparted his instructions to Forlun, Thorian then sought out his final companion, one he hadn't encountered throughout the day. Thanks to their telepathic bond, he knew precisely where to locate him. Venturing to an isolated hill in the village's outskirts, Thorian discerned the resonating howls of Harold. The majestic king of the direwolves streaked across the landscape, his form enveloped in a faint, barely discernible light green hue. He is mastering his new skills quite nicely. Thorian observed with a sense of pride the significant strides Harold had achieved in mastering mana control. It was evident that Harold's manipulation of mana resembled more of an aura manipulation than mere enhancement of the body with mana. Impressively, he was even infusing this makeshift aura with the wind element, albeit to a modest degree. As the training session concluded, the imposing figure of the direwolf king strode towards Thorian. "So, I assume your visit here was solely to inform me of your impending departure for the city?" Harold inquired, arching an eyebrow. Thorian paused briefly before responding, his tone carrying weight. "Harold, I entrust the protection of my village to you. Guard it diligently." The king of the direwolves nodded in silence, but his intent was clear to Thorian. "I am relying on you," Thorian affirmed, acknowledging the unspoken commitment from Harold. As Thorian stood atop the towering western gate, his eyes swept across the vast expanse of his assembled army with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Before him stood a formidable force, a legion composed of monsters, kobolds, goblins, and orcs, organized into disciplined units. Even the humblest goblin, armed with innate abilities and honed skills, held the potential to wreak havoc upon the fragile human settlements. Meanwhile, his mightiest warriors possessed enough strength to single-handedly ravage entire cities. Flanked by his 2 trusted generals, Forlun and Zogarth, Thorian surveyed the scene.
Forlun, a wild spark igniting his countenance, exuded impatience, eagerly anticipating the imminent challenge. In stark contrast, Zogarth bore a solemn expression, lost in strategic contemplation, seeking the most efficient approach for the impending operation. "Time for action," Thorian declared, pivoting on his heel before gracefully descending from the elevated perch.
Let us advance.
At his command, the western gates creaked open and an unrelenting torrent of monstrous creatures surged forth with a primal ferocity. Each step they took underscored their swiftness and raw power. Beneath the shroud of night, they advanced with purpose. Since the onset of the apocalypse, the forest had known no respite. Its once serene ambience was now an orchestra of terror, the agonized cries of creatures mauled by savage beasts, the clash of monstrous titans, and the desperate screams of those unfortunate enough to seek refuge within its confines. All of these sounds reverberated incessantly. Yet, this particular night carried a different cadence. "The left flank is secured, my lord," Zogarth leaped to Thorian's side, delivering his report. "And the right is likewise under control," Forlun announced with a chuckle as he joined them. "These creatures pose no significant challenge." "You'll find your desired challenge soon enough," Thorian responded, a faint smile gracing his lips. As he turned towards their destination, Thorian glimpsed Loxley's walls rising amidst the trees. Mere days ago, they had stood formidable, impregnable. Now, they lay in ruin, torn, scorched, and desecrated, mere remnants of their once grand stature. "Tonight, we reaffirm our dominance," Thorian proclaimed. "This is merely the initial stride toward our boundless conquest." At Thorian's words, Forlun erupted into laughter, casting a wild gaze over their assembled forces. "Did you hear our lord? Tonight, we shall carve our names into the annals of glory."
"For glory," echoed the rallying cry from the troops.
The forest, shrouded in an eerie silence, was suddenly awash with the cacophony of monstrous roars and resounding battle cries. Each reverberation fueled Thorian with an unyielding determination, stoking the fires of his unwavering resolve.
"Ah, this is what I enjoy.
Leading my men from the front line, sharing in the glory, that is my purpose." As Thorian's faint smile contorted into a predatory grin, the march toward Loxley seemed to transpire in a blur. As they approached the gate, indistinct figures loomed through the veil of night.
Halt!
Thorian's command brought the monstrous army to an abrupt standstill. He turned to his right, beckoning Forlun. "Fetch Alakritas." "At once, my lord," the Moon Kobold acknowledged, bowing lightly before venturing back into the ranks. Moments later, a silver-furred kobold, Alakritas, emerged beside Forlun. Though sharing a resemblance in fur, Alakritas possessed a lean and lethal build, fitting for an assassin of his caliber. "Alakritas, I task you and your team with scouting the unknown force," Thorian directed, nodding towards the shadowy figures by Loxley's entrance. "Bring me their count and assess their armament. I need to know their strength and intentions." "Yes, my lord," the silver assassin affirmed. "I shall not disappoint you." "Excellent," Thorian patted Alakritas' shoulder.
"Off you go."
In a blur, the assassin vanished from sight. Within moments, Thorian observed Alakritas and his team darting towards the obscure figures, their movement imperceptible to all but the most keen-eyed observers amidst the night's shroud. "Let us wait," Thorian ordered as he reclined against a nearby tree. Baffled, Forlun approached him. "I don't understand. We have a formidable army. Why not engage them in battle?" "We lack intelligence on their numbers or purpose," Thorian replied, one eye open. "I won't risk our forces against an unknown adversary while the Guardians remain to contend with." Forlun, still grappling with his dissatisfaction but unable to counter Thorian's rationale, silently retraced his steps. Addressing the assembled army, he relayed Thorian's instructions. "Our lord has spoken. We'll make camp here. Keep noise to a minimum and rest." As minutes passed, the monstrous horde found concealment among the foliage, obediently obscured by the forest's cover. Meanwhile, Thorian, reclining against his tree, discerned faint movements in the air. "They're back," he grunted, rising to his feet. 3 figures swiftly materialized before him, the assassin team. "My lord, I return with the report." Alakritas approached Thorian and knelt on one knee. Their numbers total around 150, mostly foot soldiers armed with basic swords or spears. Approximately 40 of them are heavily armored horsemen. They wield lances as their primary weapon, with short swords as their secondary armament. "Excellent work, Alakritas," Thorian praised, affectionately petting the silver assassin's head. He cast a smile toward the rest of the team. "All of you performed admirably. Rest now." With a nod of acknowledgement, the assassin team vanished in a blink. In their wake, Forlun emerged. "So, we're moving to defeat them now, aren't we, my lord?" Forlun inquired, expecting a certain response. Chuckling softly at the anticipated assumption, Thorian turned to meet Forlun's gaze. "No, I intend to speak with them." Forlun's features contorted in bewilderment and surprise, grappling to comprehend Thorian's unexpected decision. "What? Why, my lord? I fail to understand. Their force is feeble, so much so that I alone could vanquish them all. Why engage in conversation?" "I empathize with your sentiment, Forlun," Thorian sighed, shifting his focus to the human army ahead. "But in due time you'll come to realize the gods hold humans dear. They are their favored toy." Forlun's mouth hung open momentarily. "I don't comprehend, my lord."
What do you mean?
A fleeting expression of frustration crossed Thorian's face before he turned away, releasing an exasperated sigh. "Let's approach it this way, I'll converse with them. If they maintain civility, we reciprocate. Our primary objective wasn't them anyway, it was the Guardians. If they refrain from obstructing our path, there's no need for bloodshed." With a reluctant nod, Forlun excused himself, returning to the rest of the army. Simultaneously, the sound of Zogarth's approaching footsteps reached Thorian's ears. "Are you in disagreement with my approach as well?" Thorian pivoted with a wearied expression. "No, my lord. I would never question your commands," Zogarth assured, shaking his head. "I was merely intrigued by your statement regarding humans as the gods' favored toys." "Ah, that," Thorian turned towards the human army, a soft chuckle escaping him. "As Forlun suggested, we possess the ability to easily overpower this army, to even lay waste to this city should we choose." Thorian then regarded Zogarth, his expression serious. "However, some among them would survive and flee. And those, my friend, are the most terrifying. Through some divine intervention, they would unearth unimaginable power. Eventually, they'd return with a vengeful darkness capable of destroying us and themselves in the process." Taking a moment, Thorian chuckled softly. "That's why I referred to them as the god's favorite toy. How could I not understand? For I am too but one of their toys." After a moment of silence, Zogarth broke it. "I comprehend your perspective, my lord." "Do you now?" Thorian raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I do, my lord," Zogarth affirmed. "I've heard such tales numerous times. The elders used to recount them." Thorian chuckled softly. "Your elder is indeed wise." Turning his gaze back to the human army, his expression turned grave. "I'll speak with them alone. You and Forlun stay close behind me, and the army should remain farther away. Not too near, not too distant, we aim to assert our presence without sparking conflict." "With unwavering devotion, my lord." "Your command is my obligation," Zogarth responded fervently. Thorian waited until his forces took their positions, then confidently strode forward. His steps exuded assurance, a belief that everything would unfold precisely as he envisioned. As he neared the human army, their myriad expressions became discernible: fear, bewilderment, astonishment, and dread intertwined in the faces before him. As Thorian surveyed the assembled ranks, his search for William Ravenwood, his lifelong friend and the Lord of Locksley, proved futile. Only William's son, Tristan, and a cluster of other nobles were visible amidst the troops. Halting at a distance that stirred the knights to tighten their grip on their lances, Thorian turned to face the entire human army. The palpable tension hung heavy in the air, stifling any hint of conversation. Taking a deep breath, Thorian prepared to speak.
"Where is your king?"
His commanding voice pierced the stillness, resonating sharply among the ranks. Slowly, realization dawned, jaws dropping in collective astonishment. Observing their bewildered expressions, Thorian repeated with fervor, "I ask again, where is your king?"